move right on into the next meeting, the work session. So it's now 5:17 p.m. Monday, September 19th, 2022. And this is the City Council work session. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Eddie, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Frank Bankert.
Present by Zoom.
Councilmember Leslie Otero.
Here.
Councilmember Lloyd Roberts.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Shirley.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Zabel.
Here.
Vice Mayor Glenn Gunn.
Present.
Mayor Dave Gaddis.
Here.
Interim City Manager Kyle Riefler.
Here.
And City Attorney Randy Mora.
Present.
Thank you, Patty. It looks like we have 9 agenda items tonight. Let's go ahead and get started with item number 1, which is to discuss and review proposed ordinance to establish a vessel exclusion zone designated as a public bathing beach. And this was introduced by interim city manager. So would you like to have the floor?
So this is the ordinance that Mr. Morris put together for us to workshop through. I want to hear the council's opinions on how it's set up, see if the public agrees to it, and hopefully have a first reading in the October 3rd City Council meeting.
All right. Mr. Moore, did you help?
Absolutely. I can provide a little more detail. We last met substantively on this topic on August 15th. There was a significant discussion where we were joined by staff from FWC to discuss this matter and work through your options. At the time, the general consensus, as I understood it from this body, understanding that doesn't represent every individual member's view, was to establish a vessel exclusion zone that would be restricted to manually powered vessels only. There was a balance between not just restricting to motored, but if somebody had a wind-powered vessel operating under power wind, that was the desire was, if possible, to regulate that. Looking at the interplay of the Florida Statute 32746 with the Florida Administrative Code, it is my legal opinion that you do have the ability to regulate in that fashion, that you do have the ability to regulate in that fashion under, you may recall that there were 2 separate dichotomies. It was 1B3, where you would, 32746 1B3, where you could regulate based on your own discretionary ability to regulate, versus 1C, which is where you would have a quasi-judicial showing of some kind of competent substantial evidence to justify. We're operating in the first area, where it's your discretion as structure. And the way that works out is in 1B, it provides that a community can establish an ordinance establishing a vessel exclusion zone if the area is designated as a public bathing beach or swim area. Public bathing beach is not a defined term in the statute, and we do enjoy home rule powers, and it's been, for this purpose, defined as a vessel exclusion zone limited to vessels under manually powered. And that's all set forth in the various whereas or exordial clauses of the ordinance as drafted. So this tries to capture that. It provides there was some good language in your prior ordinance about exceptions for emergencies, preventing mooring to any buoys or regulatory markers made to establish this area. And so we've kept what was desirable about that. This ordinance aims to fulfill the desires of this body to balance the interests of the beach-going and recreating public with those of the boaters and other vessels on your waters. And so that's what this does. Lest anybody think this is hastily prepared, this is again, just for your reminder, the third go at an ordinance to regulate this and reconcile the city's code with the existing statutory and regulatory framework. And so this approach is based on the direct input of the council as it received the feedback of its residents and articulated what it believed to be the consensus.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do I have any comments from the council?
Yes.
Again, this has been going on for quite a while, and what we have done here is listen to the citizens, to experts, to various parties, and it resulted in a balanced product. You may not all like where this went, but we believe that it gives a good balance between, number one, safety paramount, two, the ability to play with your grandkids in the surf with a floaty, or show them how to paddle a kayak. But remember, in the end, this was done by a deliberative body. This is not a rubber stamp. This is not a knee-jerk response. This is give and take between adults we voted for. We had varying opinions. We worked through them. We agreed to, frankly, disagree. But in the end, it came down to this, and frankly, I believe in this plan, and I'm going to vote that we proceed with it.
Other comments? All right, I only have one, and I don't know if everyone else received this or not. This was a letter that I received from Cliff Gibbons. This does not necessarily reflect my opinion, but I thought that I would bring it up and as a favor and see what you guys thought. He wanted it amended. What I see is instead of every 100 yards, it's every 250 yards. Personally, I think that's too little. I mean, it's a bit too far apart. I think that it would be confusing, but I wanted to throw this out to the council and see what they thought, just to see if we were on the same page about it or not.
Mayor, if I may, as I understand the proposed revision you've received, that deals with the particular placement of the buoys relative to one another. There's nothing in this ordinance that specifically addresses one buoy's distance from the other. The 100 yards is in section C sub 1, and it says this area shall extend 100 yards from the city shoreline into the Gulf of Mexico. This portion of the ordinance doesn't address the number or precise placement of the buoys, just that they will be at a range of 100 yards from the shoreline, and then otherwise would be in compliance with whatever the regulatory scheme that is permissible. So the precise placement of buoys, one relative to the other, is not addressed in this ordinance.
It's not addressed at all.
Yeah, to the extent 100 yards is used to establish what zone from roughly the shoreline we are talking about, to give a general expectation, how they will be marked, placed, and appear as part of the administrative process thereafter.
And what he's asking is to insert at 250 yards north to south intervals. And I believe right now we're at 100 yards. Is that right, Mr. Riegler?
That's correct.
Question, is that a state, is that an FWC 100 yards from buoy to buoy?
Yeah, it seems like the spacing would be some feedback we get from
Yeah.
FWC, not at our discretion.
It is correct that that would ultimately be based on administrative input. Again, as it was not part of the precise charge with this ordinance, I haven't specifically addressed that. I have the FAC in front of me. Most of it is we will see a plan, review a plan, and enter into a dialogue. If there is a specific, if there's a specification, it says specifications for markers. Some of the specifications include that they must not be less than 36 inches above the water. A sign suspended above the water must have a minimum of 25-foot clearance from the mean high water mark. None of this goes to, I'm not seeing a precise yardway marker, but of course we would work through that process with the permitting body. Just as when you talk about a fence, you say, I generally want it on this line, not necessarily how far each post will be from each post.
Okay, all right. So I think the way I see it is that this ties our hands if we insert this language, whereas if we leave it the way that you've written it, then it's our discretion and we can do whatever we like. My recommendation is to pass this one over, this one recommendation. Then there was another amendment, number 2, which was to, it says, provide, however, the watercraft intending to anchor at a location location within the defined safety area may proceed in idle speed or anchorage, or, and I don't think that that's possible. That's not possible at all. So that one is a no-go also. Does everyone agree?
Agree.
All right, Frank?
Actually, I think section 30-144 prohibits any boats that anchor near the beach. And that's been on the books, I think, for 2 decades now.
This would be a language inserted. I see what he was trying to do. He's looks to me like he's trying to do a deal where if we put in less buoys and we insert this language to allow boats to come up to the shore, but I don't think that that's possible.
Well, right now, section 30-144, line item 3, motorized watercraft shall not be permitted to be launched, retrieved, moored, or docked at any beach at any time except for authorized Coast Guard, police, fire, and rescue.
This is 30-141.
Yeah, this is, I'm reading 30-144.
Member Banker's pointing to another section of code that would otherwise address that.
So that would be another area that would have to be modified for this.
And that's been on the book for 2 decades, I believe, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right, thank you very much for the clarification.
One other thing, Mr. Mayor, the current buoys right now, I believe, are 100 yards from the low means tide mark, so they wouldn't have to be changed, moved. They would only have to be stickered properly with the correct verbiage.
Correct.
Okay.
Provided that their current construct is sufficient, that a sticker is all that is needed. I just want to make sure, because if we find that for some reason their design or structure is no longer a permissible design or structure, we may have to replace them. But if their existing structure is sufficient, then yes, a sticker or marker may likely be sufficient.
Thank you. Lloyd Roberts.
Just a clarification, so that some of those buoys may have moved over time, and when we use the reference, they're about 100 yards from the shoreline. A little bit earlier, you mentioned the mean high water mark, which is an interesting measurement. But, so I'm assuming it doesn't have to be exact. You know, when we say 100 yards, it's approximately 100 yards, because clearly the shoreline moves from high tide to low tide.
Correct.
So,
Correct, and no structure in the water unless it is absolute cement is static.
Right.
So it's not precise, but it is to establish a reasonable expectation by the beach going public of what to anticipate when
Yes.
I'm looking at 3144 sub 3, motorized watercraft. It says nothing in this subsection shall prohibit the temporary launching or mooring of any watercraft propelled exclusively by human power or the wind. Do we need to modify that since we're talking in subsection 3, B3 on here? Vessels equipped with sails may enter the marked area only if the sails or mechanical means of propulsion is not in use. Do we need to do
Yes,
something to make
so we can, before I did sort of and this is the global effect of all of this, I wanted to make sure that this, if you will, is the direction we wanted to go. One thing you may customarily see in ordinances like this is that it supersedes any provision in conflict herewith. While we're in section 30, it may be worthwhile to amend this ordinance to remove anything in a subsequent section, like the section that Member Notero and earlier Member Banker pointed to is still within section 30 of your code, and it's entitled Prohibited Activities, and it has a series of prohibited activities on your beaches and waters, like open fires or grills, possession and consumption of alcoholic beverages, one of which concerns motorized vehicles. And yes, it would be prudent while we do this to, in the first reading, have it expanded slightly to include harmonizing those prohibited activities with how this changes. I just didn't want to have a series of global edits that we would undo if this did not gain traction at this stage. But that feedback is well placed and appreciated. And Mayor, just so you know, I think the Member Banker has his hand raised again.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other council comments? No? Vice Mayor Gunn?
No, I have no comments. I think we've kind of beat this one to death, and I'm all for what we've already discussed.
I agree. The general consensus is to move forward with this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. That being said, then, let's move.
Mayor, are you taking any public comment on this?
What's that?
Are you taking any public comment, or did you?
This is a work session.
I'm just making sure.
One second. Buried my list here. All right, next up, we're going to discuss the city manager search parameters. First thing that I noticed, actually, I was contacted by Patty yesterday, and it was Friday. We had two potential applicants that just contacted us out of the blue. So I asked her to, as resumes, applications come in to, or at least not applications, but resumes come in, to just pass them off to the council. And everyone knows not to discuss with each other. I think it's a good idea to always keep our eyes open if that's the direction we're heading, because you never know, the right person may just accidentally land in our lap. So what we're trying to do now is figure out what's the path. How do we want to approach this, and do we want to start this up again? Do we want to wait a while? Thoughts? Mike said.
I'll tell you up front, I was the lead proponent for a $140,000 salary because, after hiring people, I know what the market out there is like. And to get somebody that caliber, yeah, you're going to have to pay that much. Second was the approach of the council, thinking that if we hire this person, then we demand, or we want to see metrics, how much money did you bring in? Frankly, you really can't. You just can't expect somebody, I want to hire you as city manager, but I want you to bring in at least $50,000 a year in grant. I'm not saying the council said, but I'm saying that's more of an example. But my primary thought is this right now, stop the search now. We have completed the search through committees and council with all due diligence. Nobody can ever accuse us of slacking in our efforts. Some have called for an executive search company. My take is that would take at least $20,000 with no guaranteed outcome, and at best would already consider candidates we previously discarded and potentially at a high salary like the last official. Now, if you've noticed over the past 3 months that despite nature's most vehement efforts, this city has not burnt down, flooded, nor disappeared into a giant cavern. The existing team is doing its job, but Kyle needs a constructive way ahead. Everybody talked about mentoring. Well, it's there. Here's what I propose. I can contact Ms. Lynn Tipton of the Florida League of Cities and the ICMA. They have a group of experienced former city managers that can work with Kyle as mentors, and basically at a free cost. They can establish a training plan and offer mentoring. Now, the Florida League of Cities obviously can reach back. I don't know, Kyle, have you ever completed EMO 1, EMO 2?
No.
I think we need to get you to those courses. They're outstanding. Okay. I'm just saying we saw city managers, but we can look at efforts, other efforts, trying to think outside the box for this one. Now, the next one is, many comments were made about distincting, his record from others, but one thing that at least was pointed out was the lack of a master's degree. They're available out there, and we have in the city council at a minimum people that are leaders in our respective fields, and our recommendation would go a long way toward getting them accepted into a program. Tuition assistance, look, I'd be in favor of adding it obviously with golden handcuffs, saying that, if you leave within 4 years after the completing the degree, obviously you have to pay back most of the fees, that we put out. But it would strengthen the path forward, and the council would have a very firm idea how we're moving. Again, don't bring us problems. We're trying to bring a solution in this case. But that's what I want to bring across. So right now, I am definitely voting, not to continue with the city manager search, but to approve a program to move Kyle forward in that direction. Thank you.
Other council members?
Mayor?
Frank Baker.
Since before we even started the search for city manager, I recommended that we move Kyle right into the position. When we discussed mentoring, I believe he mentored under Lynn Reeves for at least 2 or 3 years. One council member said at the last meeting the city didn't burn down, and it hasn't burned down. He's done an excellent job. He's provided insight in magistrated hearings. He's done his homework on that. He fit all the qualifications that we put on the website to fulfill. Our board that we sent for investigation of these applicants came back, I think he was number 3 or 4 for the candidacy. Does he have a master's degree? No, but as the words of Elon Musk, who made a couple dollars in this country, what did he say a few months ago? There's too many MBAs running companies in America that are running them into the ground. I don't think you need a master's degree. And I don't know what you get a master's degree in. I mean, the last guy we were thinking about hiring, what do you have, a master's degree in philosophy? What's that going to do for the city of Delaware Beach? I think we should stop the search right now. I don't have a problem with continuing education, put something together, and give Kyle the job. This is an at-will position. If he doesn't fulfill it, if there's problems, we can always replace him. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, Kyle. I'm 100% for you. But I think we spent enough time and enough money in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Any other comments? Boyd Roberts.
I did take the opportunity early on. I talked to a friend of mine who we actually played Little League together, and he was the city manager for a town in Texas for 36 years, which is almost unheard of anybody that's familiar with that world. It was in the town of Bernie, Texas. So I asked him, I said, what options would you take? I gave him all the background data, and I said, so in your opinion, what are some different ways we could proceed? One of the ways that he recommended, which would actually protect Kyle, if that's the direction we as a council decided to go, which was a formalized 6-month period of time, in this case for Kyle to be the city manager, at which time we as a council would actually vote on as to whether or not he did or he was able to obtain the things that we thought he should do. So that's what it would basically be based on. However, it protects him from, Frank was saying it's a position of will, and if we don't like what he does, then he's fired or then he's on the street, which is not any fun for anybody. However, with this option, at the end of 6 months, we would either formalize that he is the city manager or not. And if the answer was not, he would go back to the official interim position. We would go out and look again. And at that time, Kyle would have the option of going back to his previous position instead of not being employed. So I think that is a softer approach. Again, if the council decides to go that route with Kyle, I think Mr. Mora, gave us some great ideas and options. I guess a few or several weeks ago from the Florida League of Cities with people that are experienced city managers and are potentially looking for other opportunities. So that is an area I think we could pursue as well. So just some thoughts.
Glenn Gunn.
My recommendation is we take a breather in the city manager job search. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have to choose a path right now. It's just take a breather, maintain status quo. One of the issues you have here right now is Kyle's workload. He's the interim city manager and he's still holding the public works workload. He's a stakeholder in this decision as the interim city manager. All the discussions we're having right now, we need to bring him into the circle because the question is if we try to give a probationary period, you've got this guy trying to hold 2 jobs down right now. And while he's doing it well right now, the question is how long can he maintain that pace? Okay, so if we're talking a probationary period, he needs some options here. If at the end of the probationary period, you decide that you want to choose another path and put this back out on the street, well, if Kyle has backfilled the public works position, all of a sudden, he doesn't have any place to go back to. So we need to bring him in here as a stakeholder and start getting his opinion on this thing. But that's the issue as I see it right now is, just like Mike Zabel has stated, that the world hasn't imploded. My recommendations would just take a breather right now, maintain status quo. We don't need to choose a path. Let's think about this. Let's bring Kyle into the circle and figure out what his needs are and what his recommendations are. That's all I have. Thank you.
Terry Shirley.
Yeah, so, all great conversation. Boy, thank you for your input, that was great. But I do fall back on the League of Cities, the ICMA, senior advisors, they would be someone to come alongside us to help us determine what the next best path would be. These are retired city officials that have experience backfilling positions like this. They are not necessarily going to be the people we hire, but more so an advisor to come in, an advisory group to come in and assist us as council members on how to move forward. So I don't think we should brush over that thought process. In the end, we still have one position open, whether it is a city manager position or Kyle's existing position. We need some assistance in bringing forth the right person to backfill those positions. And I think it's something we should reach out to the senior advisor group and find some support in making decisions.
Thank you. Leslie.
We've been through this. We went through 30 whatever resumes, applications, and we came up with the top 4. We offered one guy the job, that didn't work out. One guy, I guess, took another job, so he was. We still got the 2 other people. We had said that all 4 of those were acceptable. We've got Kyle. He's been on, shall I say, a practice run being interim city manager. He's done a great job. I don't see why we need to go back to ground zero. I think we should offer him, make him permanent city manager.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, my thoughts are, first off, I'm impressed so far with Kyle's performance. However, I do know that I can't speak for the entire city, and I have had a lot of input from people around the city. I've had some people say they want him in as the city manager, and others say he's not ready for it yet. Either way, the longer this goes on, the more unfair it is to Mr. Riefler, because he's doing the job of 2 people on one salary. We're going to have to figure something out. I wouldn't necessarily say quickly. Mr. Riefler, how's your workload at this time?
I'm getting it done. Put in some extra time here wherever I can to keep up with everything on both ends of both responsibilities of the jobs. But I'm getting it done for now.
And you're aware of the risk that we would be taking if we hire someone for public works for that side of things?
Yes, and that is a risk I assumed when I first put my application in. I feel that it is a job at will position, and to be most effective as a city manager, I need that position filled. I can hold out, I can do both jobs, but I would, if I was on a probationary period, I would like to have that weighted in, that I have no right-hand person to delegate and work in that position.
I understand. And what is your thoughts bringing in, as Ms. Shirley said, bringing in an advisory, someone to sort of help guide us in the correct direction?
I'm all for that.
Back to the council.
My priority here, obviously, for the city, but in bringing somebody along, the first responsibility is not to Kyle, but to us to make sure that he does not fail, that we give him every possible tool that we know of to help him succeed. Councilman Shirley's idea about the exiting, absolutely. That's another tool that can be used to either assist us or assist him. We can also go back to them, we had questions before about grants and stuff, and so there's no reason that we can't use that resource as well. But again, I want to make sure you succeed, regardless of what step of life. I mean, to me, it's a master's degree. I know some people put that down, but, frankly, I've gotten to where I am in life, 2 master's degrees, because that's actually experience. That is talking with professionals in their field, the give and take of the atmosphere where you actually do learn. Not everybody's an Elon Musk. I'll be the first to admit that, but frankly, the majority of successful people in the world have gone through the process, and that's where they pick up the additional connections, the education that will take them much farther in life. And that's what I want to see for Kyle. I want to see the success at the end of his career, where he looks back and goes, I made the right path, I protected my family, my city, and myself.
Board Roberts.
Again, early on, I did talk with Lynn Reeves about, because he had told me previously that he was in a similar scenario, I believe, where he took the city manager job, but it took, I think he said 6 months prior to his previous position, which is your current position, being filled. So I asked him, I said, well, how did that go? He said, well, just like Kyle said, I made it through it. So I asked Kyle actually early on, because he had a fair amount of time in his current position as, for lack of a better title, Public Works Director. I said, could you actually do both positions? And if we didn't backfill your current position? And he said, well, if you pay me more salaries. No, he didn't say that, I'm just kidding. He said, I'd love to think I could, but it's just too big of a task. He said I could do it for a short period of time, which is what he's been doing now, and he's been doing it pretty well, I believe, as well. The only thing in the back of my mind, and again, nothing against Kyle at all, I agree, he's doing a great job. If we put it off a little bit, Glenn, my thought was, what if, a couple of really, really, again, lack of a better term, walk-on-water type candidates send some information in, but we've decided not to pursue anything at this time, and then those type of people then move on to something else, and we miss out on the opportunity. Just a thought. So that's the kind of thing that went through my head. I did see a couple of those resumes. I didn't actually open them up yet, where people had unsolicited applied for the position. They didn't really know whether or not we're pursuing it at this time. But that was one of my thoughts when Glenn was talking, and I respect his opinion a lot, that if some people were out there thinking, man, I'd love to have that job, and again, if they were just like walk-on-water type of candidates, and we miss out on that opportunity, that may not be in the best interest of the city.
Mike Sager.
When I asked my wife to marry me, I was very concrete, this is what we're going to do. I wasn't holding out for a better offer. Right?
Good decision.
Exactly. The key here is the whole approach about, oh my God, what if? Look, make a constructive decision, we move ahead. We're giving Kyle the keys to the city right now. But I'm not going to have second doubts about our decision. We've done due diligence. I'm not worried about something better maybe down the road. If I worried that, it would have been divorce day one. So that's where I kind of stand on this. I mean, you go in this direction, we provide all the tools needed to ensure success and we move forward.
Glenn Gunn.
When I said maintain the status quo, it doesn't mean that if an opportunity fell on our laps, we wouldn't capitalize on it. Because flexibility is the key to decision in many cases. So if a golden opportunity will fall on our laps, we could certainly come up with some sort of action. I don't mean to rule out any possible action, I'm just saying,
Okay.
let's take a breather and there's no rush to this. I am in favor of Jody Shirley's recommendation. The ICMA has those people who are willing to step forward and assist us in any way possible. So, why not capitalize on that as well at the same time? That's all I can think.
Frank Baker.
I really believe we are on a very, very slippery slope right here. We have an interim city manager who's been doing 2 jobs for 4 months and been doing them well. If I was him, I'd be throwing my resume out to everyone that's looking for a city manager right now and giving 2 weeks notice when I get hired, because everyone on this council except Leslie and Mike right now seem to have a possibility. Well, let's see if somebody better comes along. Hey, Kyle doesn't have any nail holes in his hands, I'm sure. He's not Jesus Christ, okay? He's a human being, as Mr. Moore expressed the last in council meeting when I asked him how he's doing his job. But this is, I'll tell you, we could end up with nobody. And if I was Mr. Rayford, I would be looking for a job right now outside the city, the way I've been treated. Kyle, I hope you don't. I think you're the best candidate for you. I received one negative email about you because you were too young. I think I don't know how old you are, but we have one of the greatest governors in this state. He was 39 years old when he was elected. I still believe, it's been a long time since I had 9th grade civics. We don't have to be 35 to be the President of the United States. I'm all for continuing education. I think tonight we should sit down, work out a deal with Kyle, and keep him here under a contract.
Other council members.
I just want to be clear that my recommendation to contact a senior advisor with the ICMA was multi-purpose. That person might just advise us and meet with Kyle and be an advisor to Kyle. The choice is to hire Kyle as a city manager. But I don't believe any of us have city management experience. Don't think that we're the best choice to mentor Kyle. Maybe that's what that senior advisor does, but we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And I think it would be very beneficial to have a team of senior advisors that have experience that can help us through this.
And I will add to that, obviously the word is out that we are looking for a city manager. I think it would be irresponsible of us to ignore resumes as they come in. I think I would like to see those resumes passed off to each of us as they do come in, because there may be somebody that even if we decide that Kyle is the right person for city manager, he may be that this candidate may be the right person for public works. We just don't know. So I'm going to ask all council members to look at every resume that comes in, and if you feel that there's someone that is very strong and you want to have a conversation, please contact Kyle or Patty and ask for a special meeting. If 4 of you do it, then we have a special meeting. And so that's kind of the way it works. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but again, I think it would be irresponsible of us to ignore any resumes that come in from here out. In the meantime, my recommendation would also be to move forward with the ICMA and ask for help.
I have a question
question. Do we have an original deadline to get resumes in a date? And if so, why are we getting these resumes in now?
Because they know we didn't hire.
That they didn't apply in the first batch?
They may have been invoiced someone else. You know, we can't speak for their past.
I think the one individual indicates that he saw that we didn't hire, or that the last hire was, there was some correspondence like that.
Are these on our city email accounts? Did you?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Glenn Gunn.
I just think of those as unsolicited RFPs. We had an RFP put out and with a deadline, and these are just basically unsolicited. That's how I think of them.
Can I translate that? It's request for proposal, that's when we're looking for work to be done, and we stopped it, but companies think, hey, I got a great idea, so they submit what's called an unsolicited RFP in hopes that the company they addressed it to will look at it and hire them for work.
Thoughts? Anyone else? What's the general consensus here? ICMA, reach out to the ICMA. And what's your thoughts on continuing to receive or Patty to pass off resumes as they come in? Would you like to see them?
I would.
I would like to see them, yes. I would like to see the others earlier on.
But I would like to concur in your idea about the ICMA.
Okay. Mr. Gunn, your hand is raised.
No, I agree with what you just suggested. Proceed with the ICMA and disseminate any unsolicited resumes that come in.
All right. Let's move on to item number 3.
And just for clarification, Kyle will contact you, will contact ICMA.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Hey, Kyle, would you contact the ICMA? Actually, any of us could reach out to the ICMA, but I think we do need to make a decision.
As we say, I don't know that any of us can engage them, though, so that's the.
May I recommend that as I have established relationships with the senior advisor program and others, that way to avoid any suggestion or implication that any of you are unduly influencing the process, that I reach out to say I've received direction from my client that they wish to engage your advisory services, both to evaluate where they are and advise what directions, if any, they should consider going. Would that be a fair representation of what this body says?
Yes, that's why we keep you around.
I'm happy to do that.
Yes.
Thank you very much. All right, now let's move on to item number 3. This is to discuss guidelines for residents regarding handyman work and licensed contractor work. I added this on to the agenda because we received a brief presentation or explanation from Deputy Clackett on what we could and what we couldn't do. And in some cases, I think we all agree, and in other cases, we grossly disagree. I have a problem with not being able to fix a hole in my wall or hiring some guy to do it. I have these small jobs. Some of these small jobs are the only thing that to make it's what makes living here for some people affordable. If we have to hire a licensed contractor for every little job, as Deputy Clacka said, many people won't be able to afford to live here because to get that licensed contractor out here, even for a small job, you're going to pay 3 or 4 times the amount that you should be paying for that job because he's just going to take a bigger job to make the same amount of money. And that's my thoughts on it. I'm not even real sure how to address this, but I think that to start out with, maybe we should establish some directives for Deputy Clacka on what we actually want him to do instead of letting him interpret what it is he wants to do. Thoughts?
back a little bit further. Frankly, where he's falling down is the condition of the various properties in this city. Some areas, property owners, I say that property owners, not rentals, but property owners have failed to take care of their property. When you leave your trash out all week, when you leave refuse in your front yard, when you fail to paint pressure-treated lumber on stairs or in your front fascia. These are the problems that dramatically hit our property values, and these are the items that we should be conscientiously following up on and making sure that while we don't require a gold-plated dolphin, I think we all know where that is on Gulf Boulevard, we do want to make sure that we have pride of ownership. One of the first things my dad ever told me, I mean, I grew up in a trailer, but he said, when you decide to move somewhere, always look at the conditions of the property of the people that will be your neighbors. If they're not taken care of, get the hell out of Dodge. If they have pride of ownership, that's the neighborhood you want to be a part of. And it tends to increase as everybody takes care of the property as it grows. But again, that's reaching back. I want to make sure he does more of that instead of kind of interfering in the property owner's basic right to repair their items. Not everybody is like Mr. Baker and myself. I mean, we can, wire outlets, do pretty much anything around the house. But there are those small things that are not code related. They are not touching a main panel. Okay, main panel, yes. But frankly, look, people bang their door. You open the door too much, all of a sudden you got a big hole in your drywall. And you really don't want to put one of those little rubber stoppers that kind of glue over it. You want it just done nicely. And that's the niche that these people work within. They're amazing. They do work, they do value work for a good value, and everybody's happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Frank Maker.
Well said, Mr. Zabel. I really, I've helped my neighbors out from anywhere from plumbing to installing fences, and what I'm hearing, that's not allowed because I'm a handyman, like some other people on the council may be. And I agree with Mike. We ought to be looking at serious construction work, or, a guy coming out charging an air conditioning unit because it's a pound low and a Freon. I don't think we need a license for all that. First of all, he has to have a license to buy the Freon to begin with. But what I'm saying is, Mike said it well best. I think we should lax some of these code enforcements. I've gotten complaints. I know you, Mr. Mayor's gotten complaints with just putting down some tongue-and-groove floors in a little shed. I think that's a little bit ridiculous to hammer a resident over that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just say,
Sure, sure.
part of the problem is that we have the sheriff doing code enforcement. He's tagged with the job of enforcing the law. These are all construction laws. And, the gentleman with the tongue-and-groove floor, he was breaking the law. Look, I'm very sympathetic to what happened there. And an officer encounters it, and his job is to enforce the law. So he did. He reported it to PCCLB, which is the licensing board for construction in Pinellas County. And there was a fine given to the gentleman and a citation. It's difficult. This is beyond Bel Air Beach, right? So maybe some of our ordinances might interfere, but this is Pinellas County Licensing Board. It hasn't, these tough decisions that you have to have a licensed contractor are not our code. It is the licensing board. And look, some of the things that are coming out, I'm guilty of. Of course, I can say they're working under my license, but still, I'm guilty of having someone out there fixing grout on the back pool deck or whatever that wasn't licensed, that was just doing handyman work. There are a lot of handymen, and you look on next door, there are, pages of them looking for work. clearly, everyone's guilty of this. I don't know how we solve it, which is, I'm glad you brought it up, because it is a problem. I don't know how we solve it, but I think that as long as you have a deputy doing code enforcement, it's always going to be a conflict, right? Are we going to turn, a blind eye to this issue? It's an issue the city's got to just figure out, but I don't know how we do that.
And I'm not saying turn a blind eye to it, because I have witnessed firsthand entire homes, inside and out, being completely remodeled with no permitting whatsoever. Walls torn all the way down to the frame, new electrical, new plumbing, everything.
Going on right next door to me.
Okay, so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about major construction projects. I'm talking about the little job, the nuisance job. You want to crack open a couple of cans of paint and paint your living room, but you have 3 or 4 holes in your wall that need to be repaired, and you're not a drywall guy. So what do? Are you supposed to? You've got to hire a licensed contractor to fill those holes, or are we?
I'll give you another example. I had some work done and there was a hole in my wall and I had to have it patched and had an artist come back and do the finish work because the type of paint trying to get it to match. Probably she shouldn't have been there based on what I'm finding out. She was painting the wall, but yes, according to what I learned in the last meeting, she shouldn't have been there without a license. She's an artist. Kind of ridiculous.
I see Glenn Gunn's hand is raised.
I think it's been raised.
Oh, sorry.
Since the last question.
Okay, Lloyd Roberts.
I actually did have a conversation with Kyle not too long ago, and I was trying to find it here real quick. But I think there were 4 or 5 specific tasks that are actually identified that said these 4 do not require permit. And I think flooring was actually one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So flooring does not require a permit. So I don't know what happened with that one issue that.
It was the wall, it was tiny groove, it was actually,
Okay.
yeah.
But, there were
Or
only
something.
4 things that were identified. I think there's an opportunity there, and I was happy to see that Mr. Moore is going to go through our whole code and ordinance document. Because really, one way to help that would be, I don't care if we listed 127 different items that we feel do not require a permit, unless, of course, as Jody said earlier, if the county requires it, we cannot overpower them on that one. They're the ones that dictate it. So if we said, yeah, no permit required for this, and the county said, yes, there is a permit required, we can't say there's not a permit required.
I don't even think it's permitting so much that we're referring to, because permitted work is, we know what that is.
Right.
Okay, it's those are critical items.
Right, but I'm saying, if we said in our code document that we're not going, this is okay, but the county said not okay, that they could say that based on their rules, type of deal. But anyway, I think, we could list, sometimes more information is better. So if we had a longer list of city-approved tasks that could be done, either by the homeowner or a friend,
By anyone.
whomever, yeah, then they can be done. I still think it's a great idea that each and every time the citizens understand that they need to come to the city first, just to find out if it's a yes or a no, because it's only there to protect them. If they thought this particular task was okay to just do on their own, and Kyle knew, well, actually, that has to be approved by the county, so you do need to come through us first, and then we have to contact the county, or you need to contact the county to let them know what you're going to do.
I can assure you, they're never going to make that call.
Is that?
Anyone that is afraid that they may accidentally trigger, yeah, you've got to contact the county. There's just, it's human nature to avoid a bunch of red tape.
But the flip side, it works. If you do it, if you don't come and check with us first, and then there's a problem later on, that's far worse than coming up again, far worse.
But again, yeah, but again,
It's only if you get caught.
well, yeah, but again, those issues are arising with matters of code that are basically kind of understand by the normal person. Thou shalt not put in a main panel. I don't see, Granny down the street going, I'm at Lowe's. See the main panels over there. If I had one of those suckers, I could put outlets everywhere. We just looked at those as simple jobs. And we can be specific in the code. Say, look, if you're doing limited drywall, patching holes, put in a new piece of fascia, replace the one that rotted, these are the things that fall under the homeowners, the Lowe's exception. I'll put it, call it the Lowe's Home Depot exception, that people can do with adequate training and they can come in and, do the work. Or you can help your neighbor.
Hold on one second. I'm going to call on Lynn Gunn, and then I'd like to clarify something on this topic. Go ahead, Mr. Gunn.
Yeah, I think the council is starting to get a little too prescriptive in this thing. You're starting to manage boat docks again, and you need to back up, because I've said it before, that code enforcement is the one process that slices through all of the city's priorities, safety and health, aesthetics, community, all of that. And as to the best of my knowledge, we don't have any structure or guidelines. You've got a guy with a badge running around enforcing code enforcement, but I don't think he's got the oversight, the direction, and the guidance that's necessary for this program. It's a very important program. It touches everybody, and it's very, very important, but there's no structure to it right now. And rather than starting to get too prescriptive about tongue and groove or drywall or replacing an electrical socket, I think it's time to back up and start figuring out, who provides the oversight, what are the priorities, and provide some written guidelines and direction for your person who's going to be out on the street enforcing this stuff. Because in that vacuum with lack of or any guidance or direction, it's being made up as it goes along, and it's going to change every day. That's my insight on this. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Gunn. Where I was going with this topic was, do we, as a city, do we want to allow unlicensed handymen to do work in this community, or do we want them outlawed completely? That's what I'm up against right now, is trying to see which direction we should be going, or at least trying to, if that's even possible. And I would like to hear Mr. Riefler's input on this, because he probably gets a lot of the phone calls and has been asked many questions during this time.
So listening to all your thoughts, we're meeting tomorrow, and this is primarily what we're going to be discussing. The focus of what will we go out and what codes we enforce, and what our main focuses are as a community for what the residents want. And I don't know if it is so much changing the way the code is written, more so giving the directives to the officer and if you're doing in-house code enforcement of what our focuses are. And because you can't enforce every single thing, given the time, it's really what is most important, and who's going to do it and how we can do it. So I think that would be the focus. I'd let you know in the meantime, I've spoken to our code enforcement officer, and I've told him in the interim period to not focus on so many small things, to be focused more on the major permitting issues. If he sees a major remodel, he sees a lot of construction debris coming out of houses, and to be paying attention to some of the empty lots where we're having grass problems and the things that really stand out. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And at any point, that sheriff officer can be given direction on what to focus on.
And that's true, because even though he is employed by the sheriff's department, he actually works for us. Lloyd Roberts.
And Mike, you did mention the main panel a couple of times. Interestingly enough, when I bought my house on 20th Street, one of the requirements was to change out the panel, because there's like 4 or 5 different panels that aren't accepted anymore. That particular house had one of those. I actually went to the city first. They said Pinellas County, went to Pinellas County, and I actually got a homeowner's permit. They said, Mr. Roberts, are you gonna take it out and put a new one in? I said, yes, I am. Wow. No question about if I was an electrician, if I even knew how to turn on a light switch.
Homeowners exemption.
Homeowners permit.
So there's a reason why they sell them at Home Depot.
Yeah, yeah. Now, they said I could get help. You know, I could ask a friend, I could ask a neighbor, we could do it together. That was it.
They said you could do that. And Deputy Clackus said we did not.
And I went to YouTube, and I followed YouTube, which I do for everything, and it showed me exactly how to do it. And I'm still alive, so it's all good.
Well, I'll bring it to my place. After we leave the office, so there's no sunshine violation.
But you know, the definition of a handyman, I think that's something we can check with the county. You know, oftentimes they'll say, well, you know, a handyman can't change out an outlet because they don't have an electrical license. Yet a homeowner can if they apply for a homeowner's permit. So there's a lot of little items that are in there that, you know, you need to be careful of, that they can be done. But if somebody says, I'm a handyman, and they come in and say, well, I'm not really licensed for this, but I'm a handyman, and I can take out this light switch and put in this fan, and I'm pretty confident the answer to that is no. They have to be a licensed electrician. You don't really do that. But yet a homeowner can do it, as long as you apply for the homeowner's permit.
I think I also recall Deputy Clackus saying that the county does not recognize handyman.
Right.
That there's no definition of a handyman in Pinellas County.
But they changing out a light fixture and fan is exactly what a handyman would
Most of the
probably
time,
do.
yeah.
Right.
You do.
Yeah. Right.
Well, okay, so, Mr. Roberts, you're on that panel tomorrow, is that right?
I am,
Okay,
yes.
that's what
But I did want to, after the next item here, which talks about Mr. Moore going through the entire thing, it beg the question. Well, we'll get to that. But my question is, would it be better to wait if we decide to go that direction? And have Mr. Moore go through the entire, he's talking about going through the entire code book, because he may be changing things that need to be changed legally, that we may waste time on, because it's not even going to be in existence anymore. So that was my thought when I saw the email from Mr. Moore. We can talk about that when we get to that, but I think it may be more effective to wait.
Mr. Gunn?
At the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the homeowner or the property owner, right? I mean, it's up to that homeowner to determine whether or not the person who's going to assist them in a project is licensed and bonded, insured, if he's got the skill set and capabilities to do it, whether or not the work rises to the level of a permit, whether or not there has to be a follow-on inspection. At the end of the day, it's the homeowner and property owner who has to make those decisions. So are we just kind of overreaching here and saying, you know, we're taking that out of the homeowner's discretion to figure out what needs to be done and what skill set he needs and what level of competence? You know, I just feel that if we start getting down to that level, it's a kind of a blurry line between what the responsibilities of the city are versus the county. I think Jody discussed that quite a bit, but I think just going down that road, I think it's just, we're starting to overreach this thing and really take personal responsibility out of the equation. That's my insight.
I don't see it that way at all, Mr. Gunn. What I see is right now we have probably the most restricted rights as a homeowner that we've had in this community because we've got an overachiever who is really, I'm not going to say he's doing a bad job at all. I think that he's going after everything and everyone that he deems as viable. And I guess my question is that really what we want? focus on the big problems. And that's really the direction that I was hoping this conversation would go.
And I guess just to enlighten, I don't know if everyone is aware of, a resident had someone working on his property that the gentleman had, was clearly doing some framing, had wood saws and so forth set up in the driveway, driving a work truck with no markings that says that he's licensed. He should have his license number on the exterior of the work truck. And when he approached the gentleman, he was told there was a permit. Turns out there wasn't a permit. He was told the homeowner was a contractor. He was working for the contractor. That wasn't the case either. The gentleman was not licensed. The homeowner, reported it to the licensing board. The homeowner received a citation with a $500 fine. And so there was a whole series of events that happened. This, I guess, was after he was warned, the homeowner was warned about having a dock built without having a licensed contractor on site for that too. So there was multiple events at this home, and the problem lies is, again, when you have a deputy doing code enforcement, he's got to follow the law, and he was following the law. And when I called ECCLB about the citation, they said, we can't do anything about it. It was called in by the sheriff's department, and we have to enforce it. So, because I tried to deal with the citation, and they wouldn't allow me to get involved.
Was the homeowner a general contractor?
No. So I think that that's a lot of where this is stemming from. And, talking code enforcement, he said, I've got the extreme where I've got a resident who had an unlicensed contractor on site, and they lost all their money and didn't get the work done. And I've got, someone who's seasoned and has them, and they're upset because I'm enforcing the law. So he's caught in the middle, and I'm sympathetic to the officer.
If I may, the only time I've really ever had a problem in workmanship, delivery, and breach of contract was with a licensed contractor. When we moved down here, we sought various licensed contractors. We went through their resumes. We talked to their recommendations, people that provide these glowing recommendations and evaluations. And it ended up in court, where we had to go through arbitration because, frankly, the person was doing no work because we were out of town. They did really no work on the property. And that was a license. A license is not a guarantee of any quality in work, period. Don't accept that, oh, you gotta be licensed. That's not the gold standard. It's helpful, but back to your point, I want to bring the conversation right on back. Yes, I agree that we should start looking at allowing the handyman level of work. That to the code enforcement, we really got to dial back so that we basically, maybe by hours, look, your direction, you're going to get 5 hours a week, and you're only going to look, frankly, at those hardcore options, or 5 hours a week will be devoted toward the permit type things. But the other 10 hours, I want to see you looking at yards, maintenance, painting that pressure treated wood, bringing our city back up, because that's a major historical spot in this community. Right across the street, one of the worst properties I've ever seen, that's county-owned, county rules, and I'll talk about that later.
Do we have any other comments on this topic? Do we feel like that we've at least given Mr. Roberts some information of what we're thinking and different topics to bring up in tomorrow's conversation? Everybody good? Mr. Baker? And you said you were assisting someone install a fence?
Yeah. During Hurricane Irma, I actually was blowing all around. He wasn't around. I took it down for him. He just was blowing all over the yard. I put it back up after the storm.
And I'm assuming you had a permit for that.
I'm assuming the fence was already there and the fence came down.
It's about replacement.
Yep. All right, Mr. Zabel.
I'll be calling you next week, I need some help too.
Thank you very much.
I got a fence pole digger, anytime.
Okay.
Well, you're maybe one of 5. All right, so now we're moving on to number 4, which actually, I want to say that this is a carryover from a prior work session. I don't know how this actually wound up on here, but this is exactly the same as the handyman and licensed contractor work. So we're going to strike number 4, and then let's move on to number 5. This is to discuss proposed walking easement path and was added by interim city manager Reefler.
Thank you, Mayor. The reason I brought this up is we've been hearing comments from the public about this proposed walking easement paved path. And I wanted to bring up what the actual plan is that was proposed within the last year and a half, and kind of discuss it to see if it's something that the direction we really want to go in. Because I have not heard public outcry for this path. I've heard a lot against the path. So before we kind of keep going down this road, coming up on this project on 12th and 13th, this is where we would ask the contractor for a price to do some of that paving. So again, I included in the agenda, or in the packet, the plan, the last plan that we had. And I'll try to put it on the screen as well. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see it, but this is, it's a pretty simple plan, but just so everybody knows where the actual easements run. We start down here at the city border and, where South Park is, and the first walking easement is between 2nd Street and 3rd Street, and it's a 10-foot wide easement that in this plan we're proposing that we, which is currently grass, we clear and grub it and then put down a base and 1.5 inches of asphalt. And the asphalt would be in all the yellow areas moving up through the city. The blue areas are the road connectors that exist. So it comes all the way up. You got between 2nd and 3rd, between 4th and 5th, between 6th and 7th, and then between 8th and 9th. And then it brings you up the Harbor Drive, past the park. There would be no crosswalk on Causeway, but we've proposed getting an agreement with the county to have a paved path in the county pond property, and then moving up to 12th and 13th, where this is the easement I'm talking about now with the project. We would be asking to pave this section between 13th and 14th. And then it continues all the way up in each of these cul-de-sacs between each little road until you get to 18th Street where it ends. So as part of this plan, we got a quote, which was probably about 2 years ago from Ajax Paving, which we based our budget capital project planning numbers off of. And the only other thing is we propose throwing in some waste receptacles on the trail so that to kind of keep down the litter. So starting this year in the 2023 budget, we are setting aside $20,000 in the capital projects for this proposed trail. And since, this year we're talking about the budget, and it's come up that there's been some opinion against paving this trail for various reasons. So I just wanted to kind of bring it up for council discussion to make sure this is a direction we want to move in.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reefler. I am a little curious why that trail crosses right here, but there's no way to actually cross. That's kind of bizarre. Is it because there used to be a crosswalk there until they redid the roads, or what?
No, it's just that there was, it's just to connect the north and south parts of the city as best possible, but there is no actual traffic control device for pedestrian crossing there. And I don't think it would be something you would want there.
Well, if I was a runner and I started on the north end of town, I wanted to do this path, I would have to cross Causeway in a non-crossing zone. I'd have to jaywalk.
That or go down to the Causeway, called Boulevard, and have to come back up.
Right, yeah, but
Well, I think when this path was put in too, it was only 2 lanes out here, and the bridge was a drawn bridge, and we had a fraction of the traffic, so it was a whole different scenario. Yeah.
And I believe most residents use it as a means to get to Causeway Boulevard and then go over the bridge.
Right.
now, is it my understanding that some of this trail has suddenly or over time become people's yards?
Naturally, yes. I think about 2 years ago when we had it surveyed, Lynn Reeves made some, notified some of the residents that had some things moved where they'd gotten out of the easement itself, where they were, had some fences.
So they have, they've
Yes,
moved out.
since moved out.
And then what are you doing to go for a border? How do you differentiate?
The border would only be the asphalt itself versus grass.
So was the idea of the asphalt more of a territory marker? Or was it actually to offer, to give someone a better trail for walking?
I think the idea started, it was a proposed shell trail, and I think that was to make more of a uniform surface. As you walk through there, you find some different grades, you find some tree roots, and it was just to probably make a uniform surface at the same time an identifier of where the easement was, because at this point right now, it's just, you have a sign saying blocking easement on motorized vehicles, and you know, in some spots you have a fence and a fence, so it's kind of obvious, but in others, you know, you got open lawn, so it's just kind of like eyesight to the next street.
Judy, Shirley, you were involved in this, weren't you?
Yeah.
Would
This
you
was,
like to explain?
yeah, I was going to say, this dates back to council a few years ago. Really pushed Lynn to reestablish the walking easement, which has been there for the life of the city. But for many reasons, because people could move their fences over and were using the easement as their property, it's really city property. Probably need to make sure we have it maintained. I've run it a couple of times. There's some pretty low spots, standing water, things like that. We're not maintaining it. It's you know, kind of a hazard because it's just breeding mosquitoes, which is a huge issue around here right now. But so we were there. That council was very interested in getting this walking path clear and putting some sort of material down so it was clear where the path was and could be utilized by citizens, especially as we start doing more parks events and that sort of thing, making the city more walkable to come to City Hall. If you notice, it's a north-south access to City Hall. There is an area that for some reason it ends, and if you live north of this, you can't exactly get on the trail unless you cut through someone's driveway.
Right.
So there is some question what happened there. Not sure that we really know. I take it upon myself to cut through the driveway. I'm sure I'll get shot one day for doing that. But yeah, so, you know, for us on the north end, we have to actually come down 18 to get to it. We can't take the direct access like everyone else can. But, you know, I think it's to build a community, a great idea to have it in place. I don't know if it needs to be asphalt or shell. I think when we first talked about it, it was a shell-based that's indifferent. I'm indifferent with that, but I do believe that we should look at getting it operable and making it usable for residents. I know there's been some residents that aren't interested in having it. As you can see, it's a very small section that needs to be connected. Most of it's already paved, it's just those stretches between the streets.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Gunn, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, Jody touched on the issue of this thing. It goes back several councils. And at the time, the emphasis was to follow through on this thing and make it a little easier to navigate. There were some tripping hazards in some areas, there was some ponding of water in some areas. There was concerns about encroachment on the easements. So the goal was to move forward on it. Lynn Reeves did some investigating to look at the different alternatives, the shell base, concrete, asphalt. Basically, it came back and said, with recurring costs and upkeep and maintainability, the best decision was to go with an asphalt surface. And at the time the decision was made, because we were thinking about doing all the storm water and repaving the streets for economies of scale and mobilization purposes, we were going to pave the easement areas when the adjacent streets were being renovated for storm water and street paving. And that was the original plan, and that's how all of that was to be integrated. Well, as the cost for the stormwater started escalating, as well as the paving of the streets, Lynn Reeves came back and finally said, no, let's go ahead and break this out of the stormwater and street paving program, and it's just time to just go ahead and proceed with this thing and break out each individual one, not tie it to the street paving and just get it done. If you go back and you look at the objectives list for like the last 3-5 years, you'll see that the street easement program has been there, whether it was obtaining the easements, moving the stuff back, or deciding on what was the best way to proceed with this thing. And the very last iteration of this thing was Liberty before they even said, nope, we're going to break it out and just start paving. So it improves the usability of the surface, eliminates some of the hazards to people riding bicycles or walking or running, and also identifies the easements for the city. So that's kind of the background on that. And I'm in favor of, let's get this thing done. It's been on the work list for a long time, and let's go ahead and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunn. Who else? Anyone else like to speak on this? Frank Baker?
Yeah,
And then Leslie Natero.
I have nothing but negative feedback from residents from 9th Street to 1st Street about this. I do see there's $20,000 budgeted each year for this project. I believe, Kyle, you told me that the easement would be 10, if it was paved, to be 10 foot wide. So I don't know where $20,000 is going to come in to compensate any of this project, because if you're going to put 1.5 inches of asphalt down, that's awful thick and base. You're going to need about 4 to 6 inches of either crushed concrete or 3/4 modified underneath that blacktop so it stays without cracking and breaking up. If you put shells down there, loose granulate, you're going to have nothing but weeds. Kyle, who mows the easements now? Does the city mow them, or do the residents?
City staff mows the easements.
Okay, so I think it's going to cause nothing but havoc there. It's going to create more trash. People are going to leave. There's minimal trash now, with bottles and cigarette butts and everything else on these easements. I think it invades the privacy of these people that live there. I think it's a bad idea, Laura. That's all I have to say.
Vice Mayor Gunn. Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
let's-
wait, hold on 1 second, Mr. Gunn. Leslie.
Talking about when we discussed this several years ago, I thought we had a problem with paving it, and it was this issue that the county had. Do you recall?
I don't remember.
Okay.
What I remember was that it was also, there was an idea idea to do along the seawall on Bell Isle. And there were too many roots, and it was all unlevel and crazy, and so I think the plug was pulled on that one. Vice Mayor Gunn.
All I asked for is, I just heard a statement about all I've gotten back is negative feedback on this thing. We're slipping into the anecdotal thing again. How many people are we talking about? Who are they? We're talking about First Street to 8th Street. I think that was the only substantive thing I took out of that discussion. And are they people who are adjacent to these easements? Because I guess that would kind of qualify the feedback. So, you know, this has been around for a long time. The initial feedback was very positive for it, and I just want to qualify what is this negative feedback I'm hearing about. Thank you.
Lloyd Roberts.
Kyle, so the blue line, is that gonna remain non-asphalt?
That is City Street.
So that's pavement already?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just talking about
That's
the
the
yellow.
public roads.
Okay, so yeah, I can pretty much guarantee you, if you put an impervious material 10 feet wide, the county's gonna do calculations and determine the runoff, and you're gonna be challenged with where you're gonna hold that water first, either a retention pond or a detention pond. So that is gonna be a challenge. If you want to actually, there are options out there that you can put down 10 feet wide. It's kind of like a geocell type material that can go through there that will provide long-term structural support. And you can even put like grass on top of that. That again will keep it structurally sound and it will prevent it from sinking over a period of time. But it doesn't look like a lot of that's going to be required. That might be an option to consider because again, aesthetically, it's still going to be grass. You're still going to see grass. It's just going to hold up for a longer period of time from a maintenance standpoint, and it's not going to be sinking, especially if you have some low water places through there. But if you put impervious asphalt on there, there is pervious asphalt, but it's not wonderful. But if you use these geocell type materials through there, that by definition allows the water to go through, and the county will not challenge you on that. And you put grass on top of it, it's nice.
Thank you very much. Debbie Shirley.
Is the proposal to do a 10-foot wide walking path, or is it a sidewalk to it?
It was 10 foot wide, and Councilmember Baker said it was correct. It was a 6-inch concrete base, crushed concrete with an 1.5 inch asphalt. It's a proposal. Now, that was a little while ago when the materials
Yeah,
got
that
gone up,
seems
so
excessive for the foot traffic.
I
You don't
agree.
think that's not necessary, I don't think, but, yeah, because then you run the risk of a scooter or something, you know, I think if it's a sidewalk with it would be better. Then the other thing I just want to say is there is benefit to having the city walkable when in the future Kyle is applying for grants. There are several things they look at, and that's one of them. They look at walkability of the town. And there's huge benefit. Plus, we even talked about there may be a grant available for that because it does create what everyone's looking for, kind of that green approach to walkability.
So are the majority of people that have complained and said, we don't want this, do they live along that path?
Some that I've talked to and unsolicited, they came to me and said, we've heard that the council's considering this. We would prefer, lessening of asphalt. They said basically, we've got too much asphalt in the city as it is, and that does create more runoff issues and things like that. So to answer your question, thinking back, I think most of the people do live very close to this walkway area, so they use it. And they prefer to have
The goal is not to eliminate it, the goal is to actually use it, but not go crazy with it. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing? No, yes, no. Just looking out there, I don't see any.
My person, honestly, I want to walk it, and that is a relatively good approach. You don't have to pave everything you see. I understand that. But 18th Street, there's a family that had purchased some of the easement. I don't know how they got a hold of that one. That's one of the reasons why it doesn't extend much further. So that was a block. But again, I'd like to go over it and repeatedly talks, everybody's talking about tree roots. If you got a tree root, you got a problem. It's either gonna break up the asphalt or you gotta take the tree down. So, you know, I always look at secondary, tertiary effect, and that's one of the secondary effects. Just something to keep in mind, either you pave it or you leave it natural and keep the tree. I don't know. I'd like to walk it though. It's, sounds like a very nice place to take a walk.
I have had one of the families that approached me, their concern is the amount of traffic it will create if it's paved and creating the thoroughfare to the neighboring town.
Well, that makes sense, especially if you live on that adjacent property. I think the one thing that we don't want is we don't want the adjacent property to become the owner of the easement. And I think in some cases that does happen, and then it creates some confusion. Also, I've tried to walk this path end to end, and currently it does get confusing. And if it's rained recently, you could very well be standing at 6 inches of water. So I feel like something needs to be done, but to what extent, I'm not sure. Where do we go?
Could we authorize Kyle to look at some alternative paving methods? And
Possibly so. I've got two guys up here raising their hands. Let's go ahead and go to Frank Baker, and then I'll come back to you, Joey.
One of the questions was, you know, a lot of the residents that live along the easements, they are very concerned about it. And they're tax-paying residents, and they have a voice. I don't care if it's 1, 2, or 50 of them. And they should be addressed. The other thing is there is no drainage in it, like Mr. Roberts put out. I see it in the plan. So you're also, if you walk, like you said, Mr. Gaddis, if you walk the easements, I think about a year or two ago, the city went around spray painting roots that are sticking up. There's an abundance. This is like Root City anymore. When you come into Florida, you can put a shovel on the ground, you hit nothing but roots. And there's trees, shrubbery, and if you don't do this thing right, it's going to bust the asphalt up within 2 years. So I think it's just foolish money wasted.
Glenn Gunn.
No, I think maybe there needs to be a reevaluation to the thickness and durability of that. Maybe you don't need it that durable for foot traffic or bicycle traffic. If it's 2 people complaining, that's different than 50 people complaining about it. Nobody that I've met recently had the background or experience when it came to floodplain management and wind radius. So I think if there was a runoff issue with this thing, he would have been the first one to have raised that flag. I'm certainly thinking back to all of the sidewalks we have running up and down the city, and I'm not quite aware of what exactly the runoff requirements are for that, but I don't think it'd be any more serious than that. And I don't see irrigation ditches or holding ponds for the sidewalk we have all that. Again, Lynn Reeves was an expert, and I defer to his experience.
Okay, back to Jody Shirley.
I think that was done. I mean, but yeah, back to the 10 feet, I'll just say quickly, that's a single lane of traffic, right? So that's a parking spot, that's much wider as you need. 6 feet, I think, 5 or 6 feet is more of a sidewalk size.
So are we just trying to guess, or should we actually do more work, communicating more with the residents, and see what the general consensus is? You're always going to get complaints, but you rarely hear that. I'd love for you to do this. I'm wondering if maybe it's not a bad idea to get Parks and Rec involved and let them do some feelers.
I concur with that. Would also like to bring that to the city council, obviously more of a meeting, because we do need the input. And rather than, and I understand that the need for, put real fast, but again, when you cite a bunch of residents talk to me, okay, I understand, but they say, well, we have a lot of comments that say, well, council's like, it's still allegorical. So let's get down, let's relook it, give it to the right committee, they're going to do due diligence, but on our behalf is go out there and talk too. I mean, I just set up office hours here once a week on Wednesdays for people to come in. So we get information and hopefully it doesn't bring, I hate it, I love it, but it might be a good idea, but here's my suggestions for how you may implement it. We don't have all the answers, we're not supposed to. So let's go to the citizens.
Make sure that's what they're Leslie.
The other thing that I think we need to look into is how much of an easement do we have? And we're talking about a 10-foot wide easement. I can't imagine that there's a 10-foot easement behind all these properties.
Yeah, it is 10 feet, it's where,
It's 10
where it was
feet.
not.
Pardon?
Where it was not 10 feet,
Yeah,
we talked to those residents and moved them back.
okay.
You do have utility poles in some areas.
Pardon?
You do have utility poles in some areas,
Okay.
and you do have a large oak tree. So there are a lot of roots.
Mr. Baker, was your hand raised?
Yeah, when you were talking about water runoff, we all received pictures the last 2 weeks, the high tide we were experiencing. And from First at 9th Street, or even 12th and 13th Street, there was a ton of water. And some of that water went right into those easements. So all we're doing is, asking for less drainage by paving it. I just don't, I don't understand why you want to fix something that isn't broken. That's it.
Thank you very much. What's the general consensus of this council? I'm open to recommendations as to what we should do.
Recommend you take it back to the committee, give them the charge to basically look at the information, talk to people around, invite public comment to find out, where we may be going with this.
Parks and Rec.
Yes, sir.
Jody Shirley?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to get Parks and Rec involved with the project. I'm certain there's probably many people in the city that don't even know that we have a walking path. I know that, here's the thing is, so we're talking about this, right, again, after we're talking about it in several other councils. And my concern is we continue to talk about it for until the next council comes in and nothing ever gets done. So I just want to make sure that in doing so, we put some deadlines on it, that it doesn't just keep getting kicked down the road, which is what's happened.
I would say getting the general public's opinion, that's something that I would think could be done. You give them the assignment in the next meeting, and then they give us the results of the following meeting. I think it's fair enough, a month. Vice Mayor Gunn, what do you think?
I'm with Jody. I'm tired of kicking this can down the road. This issue's been around for at least 3 councils. And I think there's some issues that Kyle can resolve with regards to the width of this thing and how durable the base needs to be, that sort of thing. To get down to that Citizens Advisory Committee, they're your residents advisory group. But I'm with Jody. Put a deadline on this thing. Let's stop kicking this thing down the road. If we keep kicking it down the road, at some point it will be so cost prohibitive that this decision will be made for us.
Yeah, and I'm not asking this council to kick it down the road. What I'm asking is for general feedback from the public. This appears to be a Parks and Rec utility, because that's who's going to use it is people that are walking and running and doing those types of activities. I would like the Parks and Rec board to reach out to all their friends and neighbors and whatever, and give us some feedback of what the general consensus is. Do you want asphalt? Do you want shale? Do you want rocks? low spots raised up a little bit, what do you want? And let's just make sure that what we're doing is, and the majority of the public agrees that we're doing the right thing. How do you feel about that, Mr. Reason?
So do you want the Parks and Rec board to come up with a device to poll the residents, or how we?
Well, I'm just thinking, if this is Parks and Rec, we often throw various topics at different boards or committees, and I think that this is a Parks and Rec function that I would like for them to take a look at and see if they can reach out and ask the public what they think, and then come back to us on it. Because they probably are going to go out, walk the trail, look around, maybe even make some of their own recommendations, and then come back to us. I don't want this to last forever, but I think just because of the amount of complaints we have had, which I'm not going to say it's a huge amount, but there have been a few, that we don't need to immediately move, but we definitely want to move forward very soon on something. Because I would use the trail, and I know many others that would also, but right now you can't. And so it's either allow the homeowner to take it over, or we make it to where it's usable city property.
Okay, so we're, they're gonna kind of reach out and get general feedback from the residents.
Yes, I think that's fair.
And then just report back to council.
Report back to council what they find.
And encourage them to walk the trail and give us feedback all around.
Now, we have a quarterly report coming up this October meeting. As far as timeline, what we're looking at, we do not have a meeting scheduled for the month of October besides the pre-event set up for the Halloween.
Okay, all right. Well, have to work within their time constraints. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sure we can.
So by the next quarterly report, which will be January.
That's the next time that we will be able to get a report from Parks and Rec.
We could have one outside of the schedule. Want to give me a timeline? Say.
Well, I think, this is where we want to go. We want the Parks and Rec to take a look at it. I would like for you to reach out to their chair and see if she is able to accommodate the council with some type of report, and in what time frame she thinks that would be.
Okay.
It's only, we have 2 weeks and then we have another meeting, and so you can give us an update of the city manager's report, or you can just email the council once you have that answer.
Sure. Okay.
Remember, don't reply all. Any other comments on this topic? All right, now we're on topic 6, discuss regulation of dead and decaying trees in the city code. I added this because we have a piece of property with a very large tree that is dangerous. It's on an empty lot by itself, and there's at least three homes that are right next to where if the wind is blowing a certain way, it could knock it over and break homes, cars, or bodies.
Excuse me. I have a development that occurred this afternoon on this exact topic, and I'd like to be able to read it to you. Just take a couple of minutes.
Normally, we don't take citizen comments, but I'll let you be heard. Would you please come up to the podium and...
Sir. This afternoon, I got contact.
Sir, could you state your name and address for the record?
Is this okay?
Yes, sir. Your name and address, please.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My name's Alan Mintz. I live at 125 8th Street in Bel Air Beach. This afternoon, I got a call from Duke Energy on the topic of the Norfolk pine that you have described for us all here. I was unaware, but on August 31st, Duke Energy received a call to complain about this tree. And they put it on their to-do list. Today, I talked to them again on another topic and they asked me if I knew anything about this. And I said, yes, I do. I gave them the information. And they said, well, we were given this to work on August 31st. It usually takes 10 days, the most 2 weeks, to have this happen. But because of the timing and everything, I asked them, well, when do you think it'll be done now? And she said, well, really, it's already been done. And they're usually just in the process of writing up the report. And then she said to me, well, in this situation, you can expect some action to be taken. And that translates into having Duke Energy would take over the project of getting rid of, hopefully, the tree and any related situations that may surround it.
And how would Duke Energy have more rights to control a dying tree on someone's private property than the city would?
I have no idea.
And do you have any idea of what their action is that they plan to take?
No, they're going to, this should be sometime this week that they're going to announce this or not announce it, just,
About this particular property?
you know. I was just happy to have
Some action. Okay, I understand. And that's why it's on the agenda as we discussed. I told you I would put it on the agenda.
I appreciate that very much.
I appreciate the update and we'll continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So anyway, the tree, it has a giant spot on the base of it, right at the trunk, and it looks like maybe at some time it was either struck by lightning or something happened to the root system on it and it started dying. As a city, we are not allowed to inspect the tree, which I thought was kind of odd. We contacted Kyle, and we were both advised by City Attorney Moore not to go onto the property as we went to discuss the problem. But you clearly see from the street that there's a tree that's in bad shape, and if it falls, it's going to hurt somebody. So the question is why is it this way, and what can we do about it?
May I, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I think there's a few issues at play here, and I want to give a slightly more nuanced explanation. It is not that the city cannot inspect property for code enforcement violations. They certainly can. But when you're entering onto private property without the consent of the private property owner, that can raise constitutional concerns. It was my understanding that we did not necessarily have consent of the property owner to go onto their property to conduct an inspection beyond what we could see from the street. And because there was no, as I understood it, no obstruction between the street and what could be plainly observed, that my advice was to avoid perfecting a claim that may not presently exist, to avoid going onto private property without the consent of the private property owner. As it relates to your code, I'm fully aware of your code and its provisions describing a hazardous tree as a public nuisance, your ability to cite a property owner for maintaining a hazardous tree in violation of the code. There is also, it is not totally accurate to say that you cannot abate a hazard as your code makes provisions within, I believe, it's 2238 or 2239 of your code as it relates to the abatement of public nuisances. My concern is, having seen how code enforcement plays out in other communities, litigating these things on appeal and in direct suit, trying to limit your exposure. My advice to the manager at the end of last week was, if it is the desire of the administration if the administration and more specifically its code inspector determines that there is in fact a violation, that the property owner be cited with an opportunity to go through due process for an independent fact finder to determine that the tree is in fact a hazard, or a dead and diseased tree, or a dying tree, or an unacceptable risk, as that term is used in Florida statute, then we may be able to then cite them, and then potentially, if found in violation and failing to cure, then the city can explore whether it wishes to abate the issue. I think the other issue that we're having here is one of separation of powers. And I wish to advise this body in the future to recognize where its legislative role ends and the administrative or executive role begins. It is not customary for a community to have its council independently deliberate code violations. You have a special magistrate, you have a code inspector, or the manager and whomever he or she should deputize, and you have PCSO performing code enforcement services for you. That's where that determination is made. It is certainly appropriate for the council to say, hey, I have received word of a potential violation, pass it on to administration, and then that's where this council's role ends. This council should not engage in the process of determining as a legislative body that there is or is not a code violation on the property. That is better placed in the capable hands of your administration and whomever is deputized to conduct code enforcement pursuant to Chapter 162 of the Florida statute. So, in part because this is a work session, I thought this might be a productive place to have this discourse. And I don't do so with any intention of being disrespectful of you as my boss, but also as my colleagues and peers. But it's an important distinction, and one that will protect both this community and to a greater extent you as individuals, so that you are not accused later in some context of targeting or something of the sort, or exceeding your authority and putting undue pressure on the people who actually have that power under Chapter 162 in your code. And so at this, my advice to the mayor, not going on, there was one, again, to remove you from that process, and to the manager was with an eye towards potential legal concerns to incubate this process, so that if we do have a violation, we can proceed and there's minimal challenges to that. So as to the question of what power does Duke have, I don't know. I'm not Duke's lawyer, and I don't know on what basis, if they can claim, if they have the ability under either some statutory authority through the Public Service Commission, or other regulatory authority through the Public Service Commission, or otherwise to make an independent determination that some kind of flora or fauna poses an inherent risk to its infrastructure, and they may separately have the ability to abate, where they determine a tree of X elevation may affect Y infrastructure, that they may have the ability to abate upon some kind of notice to the property owner. And that, I'm not saying that's what it is. I anticipate that that's what it likely may be. I've not had occasion to advise Duke or progress on that sort of thing, but that may be the case. I don't think it's accurate to say that the utility has more power than the community. It may have the ability to move more expeditiously, but the concepts of due process and private property rights still prevail, and my advice is aimed at achieving the needs of this community while also remembering that my role is to advise and to mitigate your exposure. I'm advising, that can be disregarded, and that's totally fine, but I'm trying to balance the equities of your code with the rights of your citizens and achieve a result that ultimately is most equitable in that regard while still legal.
I understand, and again, this is more of a hypothetical conversation. The reason why it came to light was because of one particular incident.
Absolutely.
But moving forward in the future, we would like to know the best route to address these issues. And so what I'm hearing is, if you're standing in the street and it looks like you've got a tree that's a hazard, and you can see that it has a problem without actually having to go on the property, the best thing to do is allow code enforcement to do their job write the ticket and then see, allow the property owner to contest it.
And I'll add one step that I'm sure is inherently frustrating is that first step where you see it, let's say you're on your morning walk with your dog or what have you, and you observe that, make administration aware of that, but also understand that the administrator or inspector, whomever goes out and is deputized and tasked with doing that, may reach a different conclusion. Whereas you as the public official may look at that and say, hey, I think that's got 2 weeks. They could look at it and say, I've seen it, I see the problem. I don't think it's a 2-week problem. I think we can afford to go, though it may not be desirable. And if I live next to it, it wouldn't be my ideal result. I think we can go through the 2 months process. This isn't quite as exigent as it may seem to others. And in my estimation, we're going to notice this and go through that, or I'm not going to write a violation at all. And I see what you're saying, and I respectfully disagree. And as the code enforcement official, I'm not willing to cite that property owner. And that can happen. And so it doesn't mean that they're ignoring, even as much as reasonable minds can disagree on realities on the ground.
Right, and the cases that I would be referring to, I think anyone that saw a tree in this particular condition would agree. And so I just feel that maybe I'm just not real sure. I don't know where to go from here.
Can I ask, has code enforcement looked at this? Have they reached out to the homeowner or anything, or the property owner? I know it's not a home, property owner.
Kyle, can you give us an update?
There's a history. This tree was cited by the previous city manager as an Australian pine prior to him leaving. And when I came in and investigated after a violation was issued, I discovered it was not an Australian pine. So, in fact, that violation was incorrect. So, at that point, I told him, this is not accurate, and it's not, you don't have to worry about this violation. Since then, the idea that the tree is a hazard has been brought up, and my initial take when I was looking at it, I noticed it was leaning, but from the road, I couldn't really be able to tell. And with my experience, to be able to say that was a hazardous tree, it was imminent of falling anytime soon. Since then, we've been talking back and forth with our city attorney and discussing different codes that we have, or codes that other cities have, and looking at some of the processes that other cities use to determine hazardous trees. As I gain knowledge in this topic, I would like to ensure that this tree is not a danger. So I think given due process of looking at this tree and given I'd like to give the property owner an opportunity to have their side of being able to prove that maybe this tree isn't a hazard.
So, back to my question, has the code enforcement officer looked at it and determined whether or not he could issue a citation or anything?
The code enforcement officer initially looked at it. He didn't feel like he had the background to issue a violation and have the expertise to deem the tree a hazard. This is where we kind of run into having a qualified person to be able to make that judgment.
Thank you. Frank Baker.
Yeah, I brought this up at the last council work session last month, and I got totally shot down on this. And then I wrote a letter to a gentleman, resident that was just up on the podium about this, and I wasn't going to just back off on it, because I started thinking, well, we property owners do have rights, okay? And I don't want to violate that in any way. But then when I looked at the property owner, it's no longer a residence, it's an LLC. But we were just talking about easements, and this tree has a very visible look at the breakage of the trunk, the root structure. It's within 20 feet probably like 15 feet of our easement. Anyone can see this. So I don't know why, I feel like sometimes I'm in the twilight zone with this council. I mean, I bring stuff up, I get shot down, and I find out, well, you know, we can go on a property and mow it because they violate the code, all right? And we want to send them a bill for all like that. But when this tree, which is probably 85 feet high, and as you said, Mr. Mayor, could impact at least 3 homes, it has impacted 1 home already, caused a couple $1,000s worth of damage. I sent a letter last week to Patty, Kyle, and Randy. A strong letter should go out to the LLC saying, you have a problem here, you're in violation of our code, we believe, and before we cite you, we want you to fix it. And I think that might be the most expeditious thing to do. Thank you.
Like I said,
Yeah, first thing to do, obviously, is to, you know, with your permission, is to have Kyle contact Duke and find out exactly what they're doing. You know, what is this thing they're gonna do, the time frame, and basically if they got the references, you know, under what authorization they're allowed to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not an arborist. I couldn't tell you if a tree is gonna die or anything, and that's where we agree to disagree that a reasonable person can have differing aspects. It's not to generate any way the claim, but going back to Mr. Mora, that we're separate, we're a legislative body. The management, they're actually on the ground, they're running it, try not to interfere with them. But it sounds like they have contacted the owner, that at one point there was a citation made, but it was for a different type of plant. And then my understanding is that the code enforcement officer went out there and said they don't have enough experience to judge this. So I'm not feeling good. I definitely want that one step done. Contact Duke Energy because they're coming in imminently with some sort of action.
yeah, and at the end of the day, it may very well be up to us to prove that it's definitely a bad tree and we don't have those resources. We would have to contract somebody for an opinion, for a professional opinion. That's
A licensed arborist. Notice the term licensed, right?
exactly. Any comment? Frank Baker. And then Glenn Gunn. Frank, you're muted.
I had Patty send an email out from a licensed arborist that looked at that tree. I believe you were out there with Mr. Gaddis with him. And what was his comments? I further believe this tree is to be at high risk of fail. It's not a question of if, but when. It's a public safety issue. It's progressive decay from the trunk. Go back to 2233 section. It completely violates our ordinance. Number 8. So let's authorize our city attorney to send out a letter to this LLC, see if they respond to it. If not, then we'll file a code violation against them.
Again, I think that our city attorney has already advised us against doing that. This is an administrative function and not a legislative function.
To be clear, that doesn't mean that no letter would ever go out or no action will be taken. It is just that we do not need, the administration doesn't need the authorization of the council to enforce this council's code. You've already given us that authorization by passing your code. While from time to time individual members or the body may disagree with how that code is administered, that doesn't mean we are without the ability to administer and enforce it. Thus far, I have consistently advised that we can enforce the code if somebody has reached a factual conclusion that the code has been violated.
Thank you.
Well, we have an arborist saying that the code has been violated.
I'm familiar with the arborist report, sir, and that's certainly something the city would consider. It may well be that when brought to the attention of the property owner, they will find a licensed individual who may reach a conflicting opinion in writing. And at that point,
Absolutely, let them do that, is what I'm saying.
Yes, sir, and my advice to the manager has been if the city, and if those persons tasked with conducting code enforcement on the strength of that or other information believe there's a violation, they should bring it before the magistrate, and the magistrate can determine whether that person has a defense or not. So I don't think we're saying anything different in that regard, sir. At no point have I said that the city is without the ability to enforce its code. My concern is that if we do enforce our code, we do so in a manner that gives any property owner, regardless of the nature of the violation, notice and an opportunity to be heard such that the dictates of due process are satisfied.
And I think this conversation is satisfying what we're trying to achieve here is whose responsibility is it and how should it be addressed? Vice Mayor Gunn.
I was going to say along the same lines, is it time to contract the experienced licensed arborist to survey the entire city? I mean, there's some mature vegetation and trees lining some of our streets, and we've had issues with invasive species and some questions about what is and what isn't, and maybe it's time to just survey the entire city. Question mark. Are there trees that pose a danger to residents? And are there invasive species that we haven't identified that we need to think about? That's it.
I would agree with that. I like that idea. Kyle?
Would you like me to get some quotes on a complete city assessment? Vice Mayor Gomez?
Should it be only case by case, or should it be just a one-time survey? Council?
I would hire somebody to look at this specific tree, and then, depending on how that works out, maybe give them a contract for the whole city.
My recommendation at this point, I feel comfortable in finding my own independent arborist to take a look at it and give an opinion, and then go from there.
I think that's a good idea.
I like Mr. Gunn's idea, whole survey done in the city.
And clearly, if your arborist comes up with,
Mr. Gunn?
opinion,
I was just gonna say, if you do it citywide, there's no concerns about, hey, we're targeting one specific person. Let's do a survey of the entire city, and it also gives the arborist a chance to look and compare it to what else is in there. And maybe he'll come up with a different opinion.
If we can I reach a compromise here? Let's just ask the current city manager to contact the arborist. Give us a price for one, and give us a price for all. And then allow the city council to decide based on the effects we'd like to see in the cost. What's affordable? What's the best interest? If we can balance it at that point. But we can't do that unless we have both points, the single tree and the multi-tree.
I'd go for that.
Glenn?
And maybe just throw this at Kyle and make a decision. Do we need to wait? You know, if the city manager thinks it's a value to the city to get it done, give him some decision rights on this thing, rather than.
I agree with that. I think that we should allow Kyle to manage. This is what we're paying him to do, and let's see what the outcome, how it works out. Everybody good with that?
yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We are moving right along. I asked for an update on the quote for code review and recommended changes from City Attorney Moore. I'm going to let him speak on the letter he sent out today and update everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the benefit of Mr. Tarr, since you mentioned earlier you didn't have a chance to look at your email, there's a hard copy in front of you. In the last few meetings, there's been a general consensus or expressed desire to revisit the city's code. Having done a more detailed review, your code's in better shape than some in that it's been revisited in the last 20 years. Some codes we've encountered have not been revisited in 30 and 40. You have a series of amendments made in 2007, 2010, but as a whole, the general, upon the review, I think that your code could benefit from a comprehensive review to determine where it is in line or requires updating with federal and state law or federal and state jurisprudence as it may apply, meaning what the courts have said about the law, as that may sometimes change the law. What I'm proposing is a complete review and potential revision of subpart A of your code. That's your code of ordinances. In most communities, your general governing documents are as follows. Your charter, which is the constitution for your community's existence. Your comp plan, which is your comprehensive plan, which is sort of the constitution for all land development. Then from that flows subpart A of most codes. Subpart A is the code of ordinances, the list of things you can't do or how the city shall function. Chapter 2, administration, what is an election, all those things. And then subpart B is typically your land development code. This is not a land development code review. It is a subpart A code of ordinances review with one LDC, land development code, component being your sign code. And speaking about this with the interim manager, I confirmed that, a lot of people keep bringing up the sign code, but this just come up between May and, basically when I got here and now, I've heard it a lot. No, it's my understanding this has been an issue that has been stayed for some time and owing to a number of factors. But as it relates to you folks, I want to make sure you understand that the reason that the sign code is particularly set out here is in 2015, there was a Supreme Court of the United States opinion, Reed v. Gilbert, or Gilbert v. Reed, in Arizona. And what that case did in Cliff Note version was make it so that all temporary signs, temporary sign restrictions had to be content neutral. Most codes had different rules for political signs versus real estate signs versus, Komen for the 5K and the Boy Scouts popcorn sale. And what the Supreme Court said is those are content-specific restrictions, and it has to be done. Temporary signage has to be regulated in a content-neutral way. So if you're going to say you can have up to three temporary signs on the property, that's the same as whether you're having an open house or whether you're saying vote council members A, B, C, and president so-and-so into office. That's where a lot of deliberative bodies got hung up a little bit on their sign codes. Your sign code admittedly might be slightly easier than some because you do not have a commercial district that you're balancing do we want sandwich boards, do we want neon signage, and some of the things that can trip up communities as they start evaluating how do our businesses coexist with our residential districts. So that is something separate. But the land development code is part of the estimate I've given you. What I've estimated, and this is I would say conservatively, at 180 hours, at our 210 per hour rate, an overall estimated project budget of $37,800. That would happen over the course of the next year. That is an estimate. It is not an absolute, we will do this, because there are some factors that I cannot presently account for. One of those is legislative session will start in February. As we were in this process with one community last year, there was a bill pending, which some of you may remember, 620 and 280, that would have imposed restrictions on what we can and can't adopt as communities, and then that sort of the chess piece clock, things had to move faster. So that may accelerate the process. Another factor is case law. If the Supreme Court says something else, or the Florida Supreme Court issues a decision that changes the direction we're moving. And then the third is your process. Of course, if we're in general meetings and something comes up about code, I'm not carving that out from time to time, but if you want to have a series of workshops on a specific ordinance, let's take the boating restriction area or buoy ordinance, as we've been calling it as an example. That went from, okay, we're just presenting something to be quickly workshopped and on first reading to now we're having 4 and 5 hearings. That's materially going to change the code revision process if everything is workshopped to that degree and could potentially impact that estimate. But in terms of the process we anticipate, the estimate is provided for you there with the Reed v. Town of Gilbert on the sign code. This would be a special project under our agreement as framed, which this specifically calls out. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions. As context, we're doing something very similar in the town of Bel Air at the moment and have gone through more than a dozen ordinances, updating various sections of their code. It's gone fairly smoothly there. Again, that changes community by community based on the composition of the council or commission and how keen of an interest they take in individual provisions. But We are equipped to do this. I have a colleague in my office, Robert Eschenfelder, who's also a board certified specialist in city, county, local government law. We rely a lot on his work product. You will see his name on the billing for this. Invariably, he and I would be working together on this. I would, of course, have eyes on anything before it goes to you, but that's the contemplated process.
Thank you very much. Council? Like I said,
If I may, I agree, we have to look at it, and I'm just saying, okay, tonight, it's a little bit too early to make approval, but, let's just go forward with, the process of, looking at this.
anyone else?
So
Frank Baker.
A little over a year ago, Chairman Enfield and me, with the board, went over all our codes. And they spent hours and days on it and did an excellent job. The way Mr. Moore says it, the law could change, the Supreme Court could change it at a whim, and then it would be in violation again. I don't think the taxpayers' money is well spent by just hiring attorneys to research our code, to find little errors in it, which possibly couldn't be errors, or could be errors. Again, why open a can of worms?
Lloyd Roberts.
Mr. Moore, I think it also, in addition to the legal portion of it, you're also going to look at operations as well. Is that correct? You'll get back with us and Kyle as an example to change particular operations that may be identified in the code as well.
Nothing is in a vacuum. We would absolutely, every community's code should be specific to that community, pursuant to your home rule powers and otherwise, and also just the realities on the ground. I'm sensitive to Mr. Banker's concerns, and by no means am I suggesting that we're going to create bait work or bill for the sake of moving commas. As a substantive example, in your code, Chapter 54, Taxation and Finance, you have a section on occupational license taxes. That nomenclature hasn't been used in over 14 years for business tax receipts. And it's not just a nomenclature thing. There's been other measures passed as to how a business tax receipt should correlate to administrative processes and otherwise. And so I'm not purely talking about conforming to case law, but also just conforming to statute. I can't promise you that we will catch every single legal issue and issue spot to high heaven, but this is an example. Doing this exercise may help us to get ahead of situations like what we found presently with the voting restrictions area, where we start to realize, hey, the statutory sites here don't read like they did 15 years ago when this was written, and we need to make sure we're still in alignment. I'm not in search of nor trying to create problems, but I will tell you that as I travel the state and educate on matters of ethics, sunshine law, public records, and technology, the core piece of advice I give is to officials individually in the communities is, one, don't screw up, and two, you're human, you're going to screw up, don't hide it. There's nothing to be gained from that, and ultimately it will create legal problems on the back end. And then the third being that just because someone says you screwed up doesn't mean you did, necessarily. And so as it relates to that second one, I'm not keen on just saying if we don't go in search of problems, we won't find problems, and then no problems will exist. I don't know that that's necessarily, and I'm not suggesting, Member Banker, that's what you're saying, but I do want to explain that I'm not, if something's fine, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if we're under the hood, we might as well fix anything we can within a particular section, much like as we talked about the voting restrictions areas and aligning it with your prohibited activity section. Things like that that sort of harmony and harmonizing is desirable.
Vice Mayor Gunn, did you have something you wanted to add?
I tend to agree with Frank Banker on this issue is that I think that the missing piece of this puzzle is that when we do it internally, we give it to our Citizens Advisory Committee and maybe add in some more residents, it adds ownership to the equation. And I think that's important because the residents have to own this thing and accept it, that, hey, we reviewed it, we chose these to concentrate or focus on because we believe these codes or these issues are most important to our residents of Bear Beach. So, I mean, from there, you can manage it by exception. We can figure out another way to have a cursory review of all our codes, just to flag those things that, hey, you know, the terminology in these are way out of date, and we need to update these and maybe outsource that project to the legal expertise. But I think it's very important for the first go around, you gotta have the residents' ownership of this. So that's my input, thanks.
Vice Mayor Gunn, I agree with you to a certain extent. What we try to do whenever we review the code is we try to steer the code in the direction of the will of the citizens. We want beautiful town, we want our streets clean, we don't want junk in the front yard. But the one element that's missing is the legal perspective. So anything that we decide to alter, that immediately goes on the radar of City Attorney Moore, because we're challenging the code or trying to alter it. But what about the code that we're not wanting to make a change to? Who's looking at that to make sure that we're legally entitled to even have that code? And I think that's where the whole reason why this conversation came up a couple of months ago, is because we do have old language in our code that probably wouldn't stand up anywhere and could very well be challenged, if not even worse, get us into some sort of legal battle, litigation.
And Mayor, if I may, at the risk of jumping into your folks' discussion, if there is concern about scope, mission creep, or otherwise, we can start with the most urgent issue being the sign code, and we don't need to, and see how that process goes and use that as a dress rehearsal. I'm not trying to get rich on your community. I'm not saying that I've been accused as much, but to the extent that's the perception, that's not my aim. My aim is to make sure you have sound policy as a community that serves your residents well. I will tell you from my interview, I remember very vividly the mayor asking me about the sign code, and another member of the council asking me what our capacity was and knowledge on that issue was. I've had an brief informed discussion with Member Notaro and provided her as an attorney with the case law that's based on, and some more recent developments in that regard. So I think if I had to say, you know, what's the necessary scope, I'd certainly like to start there. And if that gives a proof of concept as to how we approach things and what this process could look like, that'd be fine by me. I just want to make sure that you folks have what it is you're seeking. And I do know that the sign code particularly has been raised with me frequently, both from management and council. And at the very least, I would say that would be to me, if you approved any element of this, that would be to me the most relevant.
I'll add one more thing, and then I'll call on Vice Mayor Gunn. You do realize you handed us a $38,000 quote within hours of finalizing our budget.
I'm aware of that, and I wish it could have been different. It's not for lack of handling other things in the interim, but I wish I could. I was aware of that as I said that.
I'm just bringing that up. Vice Mayor Gunn.
Well, we know we're $48,000, Mr. Frank. That aside, I would say it's not an all or nothing approach. It doesn't have to go to the legal expertise. It doesn't need to go to the Citizens Advisory Committee. There's some hybrid in between. Maybe the Citizens Advisory Committee goes through and lays down and comes up with a short list of codes they want to focus on, and the city attorney picks up the slack and all the rest and just does a quick cursory review. Okay, that language looks good. It still makes sense. No, we need to go back and take a look at this one. I mean, there's a hybrid approach here, and I think it's not binary. Thanks.
I'll just add something.
Pretty sure.
I participated on one of those code review committees, and there was so much focus on whether a tree was a tree or a bush was a bush and the height of the bushes and things that there was so little time spent on language, whether there are conflicts in the code, things like that. I see a value in doing this. I don't know that we bite the bullet and do it all at once. Maybe we take sections and do it. Clearly, we need to address the sign ordinance. I know that typically when we do those code reviews, we're looking at appearance of the neighborhood, pretty much is about it. How does this affect code enforcement issues? And that's always been the mentality of these code review committees. So just keeping that in mind, I think we maybe look at how do we take this project down, but not all at one time.
I like that idea also. Mike Sable.
I concur. We have an elephant, and I want to take it one bite at a time, and I agree with Mr. Mora. Let's do the sign ordinance. That's been on our scope. It's an urgent need, and let's take care of that first. We can evaluate the process, and I agree with Councilman Shirley that, yeah, you tend to get in the weeds some of these review meetings. I was on the charter review, and sometimes you got stirred up in the right field. But I just want to refer you back to the discussion about the tree. What we found out through Attorney Mora is that we never really understood the difference between the administrative and the legislative here. That's just one catch, but I do believe after we do the sign that we do review the code in terms of a citizen may say they want this type of tree, but it's up to us in the end to ensure that anything we pass can be easily enforced, correctly enforced. And this forestalls any potential legal claims down the road. You're doing 90% of the work up front, and this is the 90%.
Leslie?
I agree with let's attack the sign ordinance, the sign codes now.
Mr. Roberts?
Yeah, I think tomorrow, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I'm just gonna be the facilitator. But Kyle and the code enforcement officer is gonna be there. We're gonna have somebody from the county as well. And I just wanna clarify a few things with all those people there. But I'm the facilitator, I'm gonna ask a lot of questions. They'll probably hate me by the end of it, but that's okay, because we'll have some answers. But I hope we don't get really down into the nitty-gritty of each one of these ordinances, because otherwise we're not going to get a lot done there. We're looking more with regards to the processes and what's the best way to pursue these things, and what are the biggest issues and problems and challenges the city and the code enforcement officer is having today, and how we best address those for the benefit of the citizens. So, but really going through the actual code itself, I think Randy and his team are far better positioned to do that for us.
You said something that caught my ear, and I don't think we're going down the right road. You said that you're going to be a facilitator tomorrow.
That is correct.
I think that's really, it doesn't sound kosher in terms of, these are items that may come up to the council as a whole. Votes later on, but as a facilitator, you're guiding the conversation with the topics, and basically you're in a position to guide an agenda. I don't know what the legal state, I mean, it's not against you, it's just that when I hear facilitator, you tend to guide. What's the city's attorney thought about that as a facilitator?
I think the moniker is less important than the action, meaning, whether it's called a facilitator, a participant, an inquirer. I think that the council member has communicated is in as much as this council has designated or deputized him to be a part of this discourse, that he's there to simply ask questions and get information. He's not articulating any directives or binding decisions of this council. So I think I don't have an issue with him participating beyond the broader sense, and I've had this discussion with some of you individually, that I think we would do well, and this came up in my discussion with, at a meeting a few months ago when Member Gum raised the concern about being able to send things to the council. And my sentiment at the time being it's better left to ask the manager to have that discussion and report back to you and make known to them what concerns you're going to have. You being in the room to make those concerns known is not unto itself a problem. It's the devil's always in the details, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is per se a problem. it has the potential to be, if you do things in a way that you've been advised against doing, and saying, I have it on good authority that the council's prepared to vote for this, and you need to do it this way. You know, that, I don't think anybody's suggesting that's the way you intend to proceed. In a broader sense, I would like to see the council recede. I would advise the council recede from an active involvement in code enforcement priorities beyond its power of the purse and administrative direction that way. But getting back to this code revision, I'm prepared to take whatever action this council deems necessary. As best I can tell, there's certainly a consensus direction to work to receive authorization from the manager or mint at a subsequent hearing the process of at least beginning with the sign code. I don't think this is so urgent that it need be decided tonight. The mayor placed this on the agenda. I wanted to make sure you had an intelligent response and not an esoteric discussion. So you have my information to work with. I'm not advising you that this code rewrite need to happen yesterday beyond the sign code. I think the sign code is overdue, and that's not my read. That's the direction I've basically been receiving time and again as I receive inquiries from each of you about what about this issue, what about that issue.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to publicly apologize to you, Councilman Roberts. I didn't mean to impugn your motives or anything. No, you're going to do a great job. Again, I apologize.
Excuse me and stuff like that.
No problem. I just wanted to apologize. I'm sorry.
So I see the quote for the sign portion is under or around $4,200. Is that correct?
Yes, and I don't know that it'll take that whole, but I wanted to give enough cushion. Sign codes tend to take that a little more discourse, understandably so, because it is the intersection of the legal and the aesthetic, as you've been talking.
What's the general consensus of moving forward on this portion? And I know we're not in any big hurry for it to be done. There's no way we'll have it done before the election. But hold on one second, Mr. Bankert, and I'll call on you. I just would like to know each person's feelings on this.
I definitely agree we need to go forward with that sign ordinance. This was a major sticking point during the election. And not only that, but after that election, I heard various complaints about people putting up congressional signs that were about 6 foot by 5 foot, and we can't be doing that. So I would like to move forward with that section, and that gives us a good evaluation moving forward.
All right. I'm going to call him Frank Bankert, and then I'll come right back to you, Judy.
I am.
Frank?
Mr. Moore, your forum represents a few cities. What's your typical, how many pages is your typical sign ordinance in your other cities that you represent? As in number of pages?
That's an excellent question. I never keep track of the precise number of pages of an ordinance. I will tell you that it is among the lengthier ordinances we adopt in large part because it is the most susceptible to a legal challenge in what is an, at best, dynamic legal landscape. And so the sign codes tend to include a great number of whereas clauses and legal findings. And then again, in other communities, you know, the examples we would take where we've done this, city of Dunedin, city of Tarpon Springs, and I believe Holmes Beach, but cities where we've submitted sign codes, one of the other issues that this council may not face is the number of varying uses of sign codes, commercial and residential districts. I don't know the number. I can tell you that I believe there's one that was 30 pages. I don't know that we would need that here. I would look at this community and what its needs are. It's not done, again, in the name of doing it for that sake. I don't believe in working that way. But it will be longer than a 3-page ordinance. This just doesn't lend itself to that.
Look, isn't there a Supreme Court ruling, I can't think which one, the name of it, that gives residents or citizens political signage really pretty much leeway if it's on their personal property to establish any length of time and size?
There is Supreme Court case law where you are able to regulate in a content-neutral manner, time, place, manner, restriction, size. Where you can't say is if somebody puts up a sign, especially political speech is among the most sacrosanct in this country, and it should be, and I'm not suggesting anything to the contrary. But there is Reed versus Gilbert, and I can pull up some of the more recent case law. The case, there was a case this session relating to prayer in schools and things of the like, and how that can be extrapolated to this issue. I'm not suggesting that we should, in fact, what I will put forth for you will make no distinction between a political sign or another kind of sign. That is exactly what we're no longer allowed to do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Baker, I'm going to come back to you on what your thoughts are on this consensus I'm trying to reach on moving forward. However, as Jody Shirley just reminded me, we need to take 5 minutes, all right? It's 7:51. We'll resume at 7:56. Okay, great.
Thanks, Mr. Miller, for that. We'll get started.
Yes, but right now I'm on Frank Baker,
Okay.
and I was asking for his opinion on whether we should move forward with the sign ordinance or not.
Well, I'm of the opinion either no signs in the city or just leave it the way it is. I mean, again, with that Supreme Court ruling, I know Mr. Moore says you can regulate. I think there's been challenges to that from one of our even residents in the past. I think it's another slippery slope we're touching. But I wouldn't go forward with it, no.
I'm sorry, was that a yes or a no?
No.
All right. Jody Shirley,
Yes, I believe we should move forward with the sign ordinance.
all right. Lynn Gunn,
Move forward, we need some boundaries around this thing. The confines are aesthetics, I think we'll discuss all of that. Not interfere with freedom of speech, but there are some decorum constraints we need to think about, that's all. Move forward, yes.
Leslie,
Move forward with the sign section.
Lloyd,
Move forward.
and I also think we should move forward. So I'd say that's a consensus. Mr. Riefler, or please do your thing. All right, now let's move on to, let's see here, item 8. Discuss continuing services with the videographer and advertising for a Zoom meeting facilitator. Let me give some clarification on this advertising for a Zoom meeting facilitator. It sounds like I'm looking for another role or another person on the payroll. Actually, what I'm trying to make sure that I did, advertising for volunteers. We have volunteers that do all sorts of things for the city already. I think that there may be someone out there that would be willing to volunteer their time during our main council meetings or during our council meetings to run the Zoom meetings. At the same time, the video that we get, the recorded video is terrible. If you are just somebody trying to watch one of our meetings on YouTube, because it's just a blob of people, and especially if you're looking on your phone or something like that, it's hard to even tell who it is that's speaking. So I would like to have a hybrid video services where we continue using Victor, but we also look for a volunteer to man the Zoom meetings. And that's where I'd like to begin the conversation. Any comments from the council? Yes, like I said.
What was the final number of the budget that we had agreed data from for the services to begin with? Because I don't want to reopen that. We discussed the budget, we ran it through all the various hearings, and that number should stand. What was the number for those services in the budget? And again, I'm just talking about the video services.
Okay, we have $10,000 set in this year's budget.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Frank Baker.
jumping on your suggestion, Mr. Mayor, have you maybe addressed local high schools, trade schools that are, children are involved in this type of project that might be looking to do something exactly what you want?
I really haven't. My thoughts were that there are some regulars that are at every meeting, and then someone would maybe step up and actually could be shown how to operate Zoom while we're doing these meetings. And at the same time, we have a quality video to back it up that we put on YouTube a day or two later.
Actually, sir, I had a volunteer, give me one of my emails, I can get you a name of a person that was just looking for, right now, volunteer work, and that may be an idea. I just don't have it, I can't pull up the email right now. It's a citizen.
Okay. Judy?
A couple of things. You said the video quality we're getting right now is bad. When you said that, I was looking up at the video. I can't see one person's face in the meeting tonight. Maybe yours, but I think, just to your point, that our existing video is bad.
Frank's in a very dark place.
That's the shadow.
I'm talking about the table.
I'm tired, boy, I got a little late.
What they do at their house is we have no control over, the table of us. We have 10,000 in the budget, now we see the head now. I know we had a proposal from Victor that was kind of loose, and do you mind if we ask some more information about that? We don't have any information here, but what Victor's price is to continue to run video.
Well, it's funny you asked, because he happens to be here tonight.
That's why I asked the question.
Victor, would you like to step up to the podium, please, and give us your full name and your address, and we'll take it from there.
Good evening, council. Pleasure to be here. Victor Burianic. Don't live in Bellar Beach yet, but one day I'm in Seminole at 8963 Crestview. But basically, I had put a proposal forth for the Zoom, but we were talking, and I guess we're going to continue the video, but I can do whatever you guys want me to do. I can even provide staff. Sometimes when I'm doing a wedding or something, I need additional people on my team to get other shots, so I can even help out with the Zoom. You guys just have to, obviously, it's going to be hard for me to find volunteers professionally that would show up, but if you guys come up with a budget, I don't want to throw something at you and you guys say, oh no, that's not what we're looking at. I can kind of try and do both, or we can just do the video. I know when we were working with Indian Rocks during COVID, I was doing a live Zoom meeting with like a professional setup with my cameras, where there was 3 cameras, and it was live recording to Zoom, and then I still had someone on staff doing the normal video. That was like extraordinary circumstances, and they wanted that as well, and it turned out really well. It was a lot of setup and tear down because my cameras are on like tripods and wires and stuff, so it was additional time. Maybe you guys could set something like that up permanently here, and then we could like intertwine the two. But it's really, I'm the professional and I can make suggestions, but you guys have to tell me what direction you want to go into. And it sounds like the mayor was thinking of doing just the video and then separating the two. But the proposal that I gave, that I spoke about last meeting, was me running the Zoom. So it just depends on what you guys want to do. But I think what the mayor was pointing out is that it's difficult to see who's talking in the audio. I always have to edit it afterwards and make sure that everything sounds good, looks good. And you were talking about editing. I don't edit stuff to take stuff out. I edit it so that it's good, looks good, and so the quality's there. So I don't know if that answers questions, or if there's anything that I should address.
So you're proposing running the Zoom, but having your cameras do the recording, not what we're seeing, or at least a camera position, so you can see.
I can do that. It's just how you want it done. I can bring in cameras and connect it to that computer, but then it's like a complicated system that has to be, or I can bring in my own computer, and then it would be connected to Zoom, and it would like intertwine the things, but then it might be kind of a lot of setup and whatnot, but what we were thinking with the mayor was just to separate the two and have that as a different entity, and then you guys still have the quality video, so.
So the Zoom would be just a live video sort of thing, and then what you record would still go on YouTube and.
Yes, yeah. So it's like an archive of what happened, and this is just enables people to be in their living room and see it live as it's happening, so.
Ultimately, I think what would, if we had our way and we could do it, take it to the next level, is that whoever is speaking, they would be on the camera. It would be, but the problem is sometimes more than one person speaks at a time, or we're having a back and forth conversation. It gets complicated. Whereas with editing, you can actually fix all that, because generally you have two cameras back there rolling, and then you kind of pick the best view out of the two. And I know that does take some time. There is some value to it, because the end product, even though it may be 3 days later, is way better than what we get with Zoom. Unfortunately, the camera is not able to follow our voices, and it would either take a massive, very expensive upgrade, or someone would have to be literally pointing the camera. I just don't see a practical Bel Air Beach budget way to have the perfect world. So I think the closest we can get would be a final edit of your product, where we have Zoom right now with a volunteer. That's kind of what I was thinking. Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I did pull up the email. Actually, it was in the chat. She's looking, maybe 10, 30 hours, obviously paid position, but she also be willing to volunteer. I might give this to Kyle just as another person to maybe as a volunteer to work at Zoom.
It's always an option.
Is that something she said she had skills in that?
No, I mean, I'm just,
Just like volunteer for anything.
here's how I'm approaching it. I'm the legislative, Kyle's running the show. I'm just giving him, somebody's name came up, and it's up to him to see how it fits, not fits,
Running a
something
Zoom,
else.
a Zoom meeting is not that difficult. All it takes is a few minutes of someone to show you how to do it. And then once you've done it one time, it's pretty easy.
I'm not a cat, right?
Paying attention to the screen.
That's correct.
It's a good start. So right now we have nothing.
What's that?
So it's a good start. Right now we have nothing, so it's an upgrade.
Right.
So where it goes.
Mr. Baker, do you have any comments? No? Mr. Gunn? All right. Leslie?
No, sir.
Okay. So, yes.
I have one more question, and that is, if we just continued with Victor doing the video as he's always done, how much did we spend last year? Or is that something that can be done in the $10,000 budget?
I don't know if you're asking me or Kyle, I don't have the exact figures. I think some of
Whoever can
the
answer.
longer meetings in the contract, I billed out per hour for the additional after 2 hours of editing and time spent here. So I'm not sure what the exact figure would be, but Kyle would probably have an answer, but yeah.
Our summarized actual for the past, for the 2020, 2021 budget was $7,155.
And that was with
Last
two
year's-
extremely long meetings.
Yeah, so last year's was, the adopted budget was 8,000, this year's 10.
So we
And
have
then-
money to hire someone for Zoom too, if we had to.
I would like to get an updated quote from Victor for his video services.
Well, what I would suggest we do that and then look at it next meeting.
Okay. It works for me. Everyone agree?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Victor, thank you so much.
Thank you, Council.
All right, now we are on to general business. Do we have any general business? Yes, Mike.
Okay, before you, I'm going to try to at least, go through this relatively quickly. First of strategic plan, everybody talks about a strategic plan, nobody's really done anything about it. What I'm proposing is that on every agenda item that comes before us, we have a side note there that tells us what specific strategic plan item it affects. So we know every meeting we're working the strategic plan. At the end of the year, conversely, you list the strategic plan number, and then underneath it's the detail. On October, September month, you did 4 items, 5 items, and here are the items that did that. That gives us a good way and to prove to the citizens we're working the strategic plan. Right now, we have nothing. So I'd like to go ahead with that, and that's really, it's a admin function that the staff can do. Just a recommendation for me on that point.
Council?
I'm in total support. I think that we probably need a complete review that everyone participates in of the strategic plan. Whether it's we set aside a day and we have someone facilitate, or how we handle that, I'm not sure. But now that we've approved the budget, we need to look at the strategic plan before we go into the next budget cycle, so that we have we have a clear outline of what we're budgeting for.
And this sounds strangely familiar. I think this isn't the first time we've had this conversation where, okay, we came into an election cycle and boom, all of a sudden we're talking budget. But now that that's over, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and we may have an agenda item that doesn't tie to the strategic plan, right, which is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if it does tie to a strategic plan, it would be beneficial for somebody to say, let's do that.
And cost is zero.
Right.
And I think a facilitator goes a long way, because I think a lot of times this stuff gets done behind the scenes and we're not involved as much as we probably should buy in and be involved and participating in it. So, I was in a planning session where we hired someone with Safety College. They have a facility now in the Icon Center that they do a great job facilitating such a thing. So I don't know, I think it's a great idea, and I think we should get it summarized and readable and have it in front of us all the time.
Yeah. Vice Mayor Gunn?
I'm on board for anything that focuses a little more attention and gives it a little more emphasis.
Frank Baker?
I don't know where to go with it. I mean, governments and government agencies all have strategic plans, and they're all great until they don't need to, until something comes up and they don't want to use them. So, I'm not for it, no.
All right. Leslie?
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I think for the most part, the general consensus is to adhere to this. And so to review, every time an item is put on the agenda, it needs to be matched up to the strategic plan.
If possible, sometimes there's not. But it tells us what direction are we going.
And then if it is in conflict with the strategic plan, that's something that we would discuss also. And whether we would need to consider altering the strategic plan slightly to accommodate this, or if the strategic plan is no longer, that section of the strategic plan is no longer valid.
Okay.
Okay, all right, I like that. Now, how do we actually do this? So everyone that adds an agenda item would need to go find it in the strategic plan.
Yeah, and in a way that affects you reading and knowing about the strategic plan.
True. Interesting, I like that. Okay, well, let's give it a shot.
Yes, sir.
So I will no longer be putting any agenda items.
And actually, I'll do the same.
I'm sure our readings will get.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. Yeah, thank you.
Kyle, you look like you would like to ask.
Question. So we're going to apply this obviously to the work sessions that we're adding agenda items to discuss. Are we also doing this for the council agenda and council meetings?
Say it one.
Are we also applying this to regular council meetings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then work sessions as well?
And there may be times where it doesn't apply anywhere,
Sure.
where it's just some general housekeeping that we're doing.
It's making us think, right?
Yeah.
What's that?
Making us think, are we really?
Making us think.
This is what we're discussing.
And,
The business.
Maybe whenever there is no, there's no tag to a specific strategic plan line item, maybe we have to explain why.
Yeah.
This will be interesting. I hope it doesn't make our meeting run 12 hours again, otherwise Victor's going to get rich. But I think this will be pretty straightforward. Once we've done it a few times, I think it'll just be second nature.
Yes, sir. Okay, next item, we already talked about really, code enforcement, we really need several different laws, but big concern here is West Nile virus. We talked about standing little puddles. We got the biggest puddle of them all, basically the swamp. It's no longer, it's a swamp. We're draining the swamp here. What I'm recommending is that we do plantings around the fence, basically hide it. Instead of taking Saturday in a Bel Air Shores Beach, we organize, the same people, go over to the pond, dig the holes, plant bougainvilleas, whatever climbing vines, hide the fence. I guess no more than about $1,000, $20 for donuts. The next part of that would be was in contact with the West Nile virus, we need to get the fountain back. That's a county place. They need to have a schedule at least twice a month, mowing it, picking up all of the fallen fronds, but maintenance. If we get that pond there, the fountain working again, we've had it, it will reduce mosquito incidents and provide a welcoming sign coming into our city. Look, let's be proud of it. I don't want to see the first thing I see coming in, it's a swamp.
Council?
First, I don't think we need to imply that we just mean Bel Air Shores Beach, we do Bel Air Beaches Beach as well, you know that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And I think, Kyle, didn't you mention that we have some type of a handshake deal with the county, that we actually maintain the pond, grass area?
My understanding and meeting with the county or the increases here is that we go above and beyond on that property because if they were charged with just maintaining it like they do every other retention pond in the county, it would not be to our standards.
Okay.
So I think that we still need to focus our efforts. I don't think we're going to get much more out of them.
Right.
And just on that note, I recently had the mosquito treatment staff through here because of the higher rate of mosquitoes. They did assure me that there were healthy mosquito fish living in the pond and that it was not a mosquito issue over in the county pond. And as far as the fountain, I know we've had a fountain here I think in the early 2000s. And I've been soliciting quotes for a fountain, a replacement fountain. One thing that was brought up in the past is that, the depth of the actual pond is pretty shallow. So I've been making sure that people are quoting a future fountain have been aware of this because I think it did present a maintenance issue over time. So I just wanted to make sure it was an investment the city was going to make or some other donation, that maybe it was something that would last and it was something that was realistic that we could keep. And then, as far as the fence, again, I'm going to reach back out. I know, again, when Reese is here, we brought up the fence, we were quite hurt back on any kind of action for that fence, whether it needs to stay there, because it is falling apart, it's been for quite some time. So I'm going to follow up on that.
I have a question. Do we own the fence?
No, county.
So if we bury the fence in plant life, I may not like that.
I want to take, I want to communicate with them to find out what they're okay with us doing as far as planting, if there's some maintenance that we can do on the fence itself, and also the fountain, if they would permit another fountain in that.
Okay. And in your opinion, is there there any hazard that could be created by hiding that fence with a lot of vegetation?
I do not think there's a hazard. I believe that what they said is they have certain guidelines, criteria where they do and do not put fences, and then when they were out here, they thought that that possibly didn't even need a fence because the slope itself wasn't steep enough. Because we did ask, you see some retention ponds, completely fenced all the way around.
You should know what that requirement is.
I was gonna actually ask about it, because I know you guys do a nice job, where we outsource the ponds and removing all the built-up silt over time and taking it back to the original design. Does the county do that on their pond across the street? I mean, it should.
They do follow up and they do maintenance reports on it, and they said that it was still functioning in the way that they felt that they did not have to do dredging. So again, that's gonna have to go back to what their criteria is.
I don't think they care about how it looks, just whether it works or not.
Can I just make one statement? I know that part of the reason the fountain is no longer there is there's times the pond's dry,
Right.
and therefore the motor burns up,
Right.
sucks in mud. It was a maintenance nightmare.
Okay. Again, moving on, parking costs. The actual parking costs, we pay maintenance is $9,700 a year. Frankly, I looked at other cities, and they're using Parkmobile. You may have used it yourself. It's an app, it doesn't require a machine. Potentially, we can avoid most of that $9,700 a year by going to Parkmobile. I'm going to contact them and see about, a demo. The second part is, when you use a charge card, people don't understand that somebody has to pay the fee for the charge. It's usually the retailer. In some cases, I'm not sure, and I don't ask for the answer now, but we may be paying that charge fee instead of the bank. We may have to be footing that permission to use charge card. So anyway, the thought is, I will contact Parkville for a demo and find out what their costs are. And it's not that they don't know how to enforce, because now sheriffs works regularly with Clearwater, they use Parkville, and they know how to enforce those. So it's a thought, a way to get 97, or at least a large portion of that for use in another project by the city.
Comments?
Can I just ask, is this again an administrative thing that staff should be contacting vendors on this?
That's fine. I just bring up the idea,
I
yeah.
don't want us to overstep and be in a.
No, I agree. No, good point.
I think that,
Just bring it up.
yeah, to the extent of what we do is we decide how much we want to charge, and we've done that in the past. And but as far as how it's all how it's processed, what you do, how the business is ran, that's not really our main objective.
I understand, but our objective is to obviously save money where we can. I'm just proposing that, but I think I already gave Kyle the link, and you can talk to them and see about cutting down some of the money.
Mayor. Yeah, as far as this, the sign, that is something we've discussed amongst the staff, and it is a good idea, considering the amount of time I've just been changing out parts in most of the years to keep them running. As far as, some extra help, I have no issue with some scheduling some meetings with council members able to.
I'll tell you one thing about Park.
What?
I'll tell you one thing about Park Mobile that we'll do, that it will actually hurt us. We put a 3-hour limit on that meter to make people walk back from the beach. It's a pain in the butt to have to get up, leave their stuff, walk all the way back to the car, feed the meter again. If you do this Park Mobile, they don't have to do that. They stay all day.
We don't know.
What's that?
We don't know. We haven't talked to Parkmobile yet. Everything computer can be adjusted.
Oh, no, with Park Mobile, all you need is your license plate and your number, your parking
More
number.
likely, you get the notice that your meter's about to expire, or someone just, put another 3 hours on it.
And,
But then
extra 3 hours is also income too.
Yeah, no, that's a good thing, that's a.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's nice to have the money, but the purpose of the 3 hours was to make sure that people weren't staying here all day long, using this parking lot as beach parking. That's why we did that. You remember that?
Yes.
Still looking to pursue that, I mean,
Now, if the council changes their mind, that's another story, but,
And also, I just, as a reminder, anything will ultimately go through a procurement process, or, you know, that's not, this discussion wouldn't suddenly be there removed tomorrow. That's right. You'd have to see an agreement. I would certainly ask for the opportunity to review any
Yeah.
agreement you enter into with a vendor.
and I would like to state that, yeah, I thought about this, but Kyle's already been proactive, the staff and them have already been looking at various ways. Just want to put that out.
Frank?
Do those meters, Kyle, take, regular cash too?
Yes, they take dollar bills and fives.
That's what I thought. And since we're a city, a public entity, we still think on that Federal Reserve note, says this note's good for all public debts, private, and public. So if we eliminate the meters, would that put us into a possible suit by somebody saying, I don't have Park Mobile, I want to pay in cash, and that's my constitutional right? Or through the Federal Reserve?
Reserve is already doing that.
Nationwide.
Clearwater's doing it. There's plenty of places where there's no slot, no way to pay in person. You just look at the number and you have to use the app.
No one's challenging that, is what you're saying.
Jerry?
I would say that it's not been, as the person on this council charged with giving legal advice, I've not had occasion to research it. Previously in another community, to be able to answer that on an informed basis, if we moved in that direction, that would certainly be something that could be researched.
Thank you.
Just a question, this came up, and you can tell we take a train, so we have all this, but,
I'm so excited.
talking about parking, should that have its own fund in our budget, and should that money be designated for, I mean, I know we have the revenue itemized, but we don't have any expense other than the cost of the parking meter, right? We don't use that fund for parking lots or anything like that.
It's not dedicated towards that, it's goes to the general fund. And that is actually in the non-departmental budget.
Is that how it should be, you think? This is a question.
I don't have an opinion on the matter, just
Yeah.
as to how your funds should be structured.
I mean, it's something that we could look into.
Yeah, I'm just curious about it, because I heard contrary to that, so that's why I'm asking.
Any other comments on number 3? No?
Okay, this is one of the big ones. You obviously know there's 2 ways of Clearwater. Modern 4-lane with plenty of roads and our little place that routinely, and I use the term correctly, gridlocked on weekends. That's a safety issue. And it's not only the causeway, it's coming up Gulf. Definitely a safety issue that people trying to get in here. The rule of thumb in our community is shop during the week and hunker down on the weekends. Unless you're leaving very early in the day or very late at night, it's a pain to get back to your house. What I'm requesting, and actually I'm going to look into it, is, and this may be a multi-person task, is when we need to approach the city of Clearwater. They're using our roads, basically using the trust of our citizens, but we need to talk with them about potential usage fees. Second of all, actually, we talk to people in classes. Various hotels are very touchy about this, about bad public perceptions. Talking to individual hotels and their ownership groups about what the situation is in our city, and seeking a mutual agreed upon solution. There's not a lot they can do other than offer money or time perhaps for parks, but we definitely need to look at this. When I say multiple task, I mean perhaps the mayor can go present a briefing at Clearwater, or I can go to check out the various hotels and find out groups and get out an approval letter. But we definitely need to take a look at this.
Isn't Goff Boulevard a county road?
Understand it's a county road, but they're basically gridlocking the city. If there was nobody in Clearwater, we wouldn't be gridlocked.
Well, we don't have the authority to change that if it's a county road.
We don't need authority to talk about to hotels and various public institutions that through their marketing and their practice drives our traffic into gridlock. That's not really Ken, we're talking about maintenance. We're talking about, fees for them, kind of green
But
traffic.
the only way you would curb that, Mike, would be to put a toll booth on,
No. We are talking to Clearwater about use of gridlocking our public, locking them away for the weekend, basically driven their economy. We don't have hotels. We don't have bed tax. They love to drive their traffic.
and you're in the belief that they're gonna give some of that impact fee to us?
Yes, actually, it's been done. It's not only here, but various other cities have done that. They talk to these corporations, and the corporations, want to have goodwill. If you've driven down Gulf, there's a brand new, I guess it's about 11-story hotel that's under construction over there, probably running about 400 people into that place. And most of those, I can tell you half, will gridlock this Gulf and Causeway going to their, weekend retreat.
I can
Well,
tell you.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. When I moved here, well, I started looking here 15 years ago, you go into Clearwater, there's probably twice as many hotels, maybe 3 or 4 times as many hotels. So the city planner isn't cutting back on tax revenue, what you're seeing that these hotels bring in and businesses bring in. I don't think they're gonna give any of it to us.
Here's the key. You're never going to get what you don't ask for.
I think a lot of it also has to do with the relationship you have with the neighboring community. I'm sure it's possible, but I'm going to say it's probably not going to happen. This is probably a better conversation to start having with Full Open Dallas, because they're the ones that look at all the roads. They look at how to bring more and more people into the community. My thoughts are Sam Key needs a new bridge, going across the intercoastal, heading right back to Clearwater. And then that way they could come.
You mean a roundabout?
They could come in on one side, on the north side, and then they could exit on the south side or vice versa. But it takes years and years to make something like that happen. Right now, it's not Clearwater that's doing this, it's Waze, it's Google Maps, it's Apple. It's saying the shortest route is to go through Bel Air Beach and head north. And yes, it does impact us, but I think you have to start having a nice conversation instead of we're going to toll the bridge and make everybody mad. So that's my thoughts. Does anyone else have any comments on this? Vice Mayor Gunn, you've been down this road.
Yeah, there was supposed to be some improvements with the traffic control center, looking at the traffic at the intersection of Gulf Boulevard and the Causeway. And to date, I'm not quite sure that's been improved. I think we probably need to go down as a group and stand in that op center and ask some intelligent questions about that. I think the biggest improvement has been the 2 left turn lanes, has sped things up a little bit. I know there's been some concerns from some of the residents about safety, but I think if you look at traffic backing up through that first island, I think things have improved. And while there's always a perception that you're waiting there longer, I think traffic is actually moving faster. The political relationship has been tried at the Clearwater Council and Mayor level. It didn't really get us anywhere. So, yeah, I'm at a loss there. it's a reality that we all need to face. I think, try to stress upon them that it seems like the city planners in Clearwater are building more and more hotels without a thought to where these people park. And a lot of people are driving around on the weekends looking for a parking place up there, and it backs up onto the North Boulevard. Take a look at it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, the thing that I heard in my brain was pound sand. That's the voice that I heard. That's what I think the response would get.
And that's been the response.
I'm young, I'm naive, okay?
No, I think it's worth a try.
Yeah. Okay, move on. We've been working our butts off about the strategic, the long term. We've been working flood plans, we've been working valves. Problem is, and we know it happens, the right influence, regardless of how much we engineer, we're gonna flood. What I noticed, Dr. Kyle, we have one pump in this place, one pump and some hose. What I'm requesting, and my vision is, get 8 of these. They're around 800 apiece. Not only for use with, look, immediately dewatering. I understand the pumps are working, but look, you throw one of these in, a pump, followed by what's called an inductor. So you're now using the pressure of water to suck even more water, move it out. In the Navy, I'm an expert, we dewater. That's why you keep a ship from sinking. When we do this, about $6,400 total, whereas during rain, when we are getting the massive flooding, pump out the streets. Just get them back down to where people can safely enter, exit, they're not flooded. And it's not only the problem streets, but other areas as well occasionally have flooding, where you can actually use this to get rid of the water. Thoughts?
I think that would be more of a Kyle question.
I would say to start small and try and test this idea. I think, and Lynn and I discussed it in the past, on certain days when our check valve's working on 7th Street and we're not getting a low tide cycle where it's evacuating the pipe itself, and then we're getting, reasonable amounts of rain and it's filling up, that it would be a time that we would go down there and, keep track of the water level in that storm sewer and pump it out.
Yeah, we just want to see the water coming up halfway up the street, but yeah, I mean, we start small, see what the effects are.
Yes.
Plan, do, check, act, and then we can go on from there, but definitely it probably needs at least one more pump in addition to the one we have, and enough hose to reach the bay.
So it pumps out of the street into the bay, which is already coming up over the seawall.
And I don't know, I mean, I don't know, but right now, nothing's being done. We can't afford no longer kind of, hey, we know what happens, but it's not right. Let's at least try to propose a solution, start small, see what works.
Frank?
Who's gonna man these pumps and roll out the hoses? We only have, 2 or 3 people on the staff. Wouldn't the better alternative be what I suggested months ago? To put a spill pipe in to a basin tank and then pump it out once it reaches that certain level?
Because we're not talking about just your street, we're talking about citywide, and the pump is.
I'm talking about every street light that has flooding potential. Not just 7th Street, not just 8th Street. You have 1st and 2nd Street that have problems. I can show you pictures of this past couple weeks. Well, Kyle actually sent them to us. I don't know who's gonna roll these 100 feet, 150 foot, what size hose you talking about? 6 inches, 8 inches?
No, you probably do a 3 to 5. 3 to 5 with an inductor, you familiar with those?
3 to 5, how much volume do you get out of 3 to 5? We don't get much.
Are you familiar with an inductor?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, you need right in 2. I mean, we need to be starting to do something. You can't just argue, no. You gotta be proactive, and that's what I'm trying to do here.
But what I'm saying, Mike, is you have to have a plan. Where are you gonna put these pumps at? Where are you gonna unroll the hose at? And as like Jody said, if it's coming over the seawall, it's coming over the seawall.
Okay, I understand what you're coming back. What's that plan? Look, you gotta start somewhere.
Yeah, I think this is just a
Move forward.
constructive conversation.
Exactly.
And it's just an idea of Mr. Zabel to plant his ideas in our heads and get us thinking. I'm not object to it, and whether we agree with it or not, it's something to think about. Mr. Zabel, I'm going to give you the 15-minute warning.
Okay, actually, I'm about to flush this. Sorry, did I say that? Okay, how do I get my kayak in the water? Look, the water's not out there just for the rich boat owners, sorry. Somebody with a kayak, it'd be nice to go out there. What I'm suggesting is, and I recommend other people, floating piers. They can be attached to the regular pier at these small parks. Nobody's gonna come up with a car, park it there, no, because you're not allowed to park on the streets. You bring your kayak, drag it out in two little wheels, get on the floating platform, get on your kayak, go watch your dolphins. Inexpensive. If you want to see the emails, I'm more than willing to forward them to the city, they'll forward them on to you, but we've received good responses on this. And again, you buy it on Amazon, they're about $2,800 for one of these. And we only have a limited number of parks, so I thought that might be a good idea for everybody.
I'm gonna inject a little negativity on this. I love the idea of being able to launch kayaks at any of our public property. However, those things are dangerous, and I have one, and I have a new neighbor next door, and he asked me to let his visiting mother launch their kayaks off of my dock. I refused. Number one, because I wasn't there to monitor the property and make sure that they don't get hurt. And number two, because I busted my rear end multiple times, moving from the dock to the floating dock, and slipped and fell. It's not pretty, and it hurts. Whatever, if we decide to do this at some time in the future, I would like for it to be something that's a little more public safe than just throwing something floating.
Yeah, I agree with that, but it's also just trying to take care at this point, is looking toward the needs of the community, the rest of the community, but again, do it in a safe manner.
Right. Yeah, because as soon as somebody falls, we know what happens.
That's right. So just want to roll it up. Look, costs. Strategic plan, free. Draining the swamp idea, if we work through this thing, it's about $1,000. Parkmobile, it's just potential savings. We'll find out more. Impact fees, it's kind of a non-starter here. Pump hoses and inductors, yeah, $10K, but that's if you're getting all eight. You get another one, it's at the most $800 and some hose. We'll look at the floating piers. And frankly, it's minimal cost, and here's where what can be driven. We budgeted $140K for city manager. We're holding up the search. The money is there. It's not about always providing undergrounding, all the nasty stuff. It's okay that once in a while you don't have to feed medicine to the kid. That we should also be preparing for making our neighborhood nice, as well as safe, as well as beautiful. And that's what I tried in all of this today. And again, it's at a reasonable cost. So thank you for your attention and appreciate your time. Thank you.
I just had a quick question for Kyle. I'm sure people have asked before about a good place to launch kayak. Do people use like line here? I'm just curious.
Yes, they do launch kayaks here, and we see people come up for trailers and launch them, take it somewhere else. And we also have a paddock, stand-up paddleboard that launches from this area.
I have a question about that, because I came by the other day and the sign says, don't enter. It's just keep off the property or something, the sign right out there. I'm pretty sure that's what I saw. It's something about don't come. Maybe it's because of the location where it was
The
at.
county sign possibly with the right of way. There's a county sign that says private property,
It didn't say private property, but it was right out there, right on the shore. I was passing by and I thought, why would you not want me to land there?
Oh, coming from the water side.
What's that?
From the water side, is it that?
From the water side.
I'll look into that.
I could
never come
maybe I
from that
misread, but I think that's what it was saying is basically stay out. I don't understand why, unless it's because of future development. I don't know. I don't know why it's there.
Were you in your vote?
Yeah.
Well, I think that was great out here.
You got beverages?
That explains it.
There was a time, and I don't know whatever came of this, but at the marina, there's a slip that's not rentable. And so when they put a fence up, Lynn put a fence up and left that one half slip open with the thought that we could maybe use it for paddleboard polishing and things like that. Whatever came of it, I don't know. I know the gentleman that rents that end slip was excited about people coming up next to his boat on paddleboard, so maybe that killed it. But there is a half slip that would accommodate those things.
That's because there's a drain pipe in it.
But that's thinking, yeah. Can we check that out?
Yeah, thinking with the floating docks, with the changes in the water level, how that would affect. We have some kayak launches built on the fishing docks, that's a tiered step.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, again, bring it forward discussion, and I think you got great ideas.
Vice Mayor Gunn. You're muted.
You muted.
Prior to the pandemic, we did a survey, best practices, what's the best use of our property. Planning and zoning board took a look at the marina and the pocket parks and made some recommendations. That stuff's in the file somewhere, and we kind of basically archived it because of the pandemic, but it may be time to pull those things out and take a look at it again.
I'll take a look at them Wednesday. Thank you.
I think even part of that was, there was a suggestion of having sort of like kayak and paddleboard lockers on the parks, each one of the parks. So that would be like, you'd have your spot and you wouldn't have to carry it every time. Just walk over there and.
You know, Park Mobile may be able to handle that too. It's like Lockerland at Universal Studios. Okay, no, that's all I have, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, Mr. Zabel, I appreciate you taking so much time and thought, and putting so much thought and your time into this. Next time, add it to the agenda.
Yes, sir.
And just give us a general summary of what you're going to do, and then that way we can allot our time.
Got it, and I'll make sure I mark strategic plan on it.
There you go. Any other general business? Is everybody ready to go home? Vice Mayor Gunn.
Two quick things. One is, we talked about the ICMA and the Florida League of Cities Senior Advisors, and I'm not sure we're talking apples to apples. I think they're two different programs, and I just want to make sure that Jody brought up ICMA, I brought up ICMA, Randy, the city attorney, Randy Moore, defaulted to his experience and relationship with the Florida League of Cities Senior Advisors. And I'm thinking they're two different groups, because, you know, when he mentions it in Tipton and all that, it's not the same group that I'm familiar with. And I think Jody's thinking of all their retired city and county managers working with ICMA, and they have a program, the Rangers or whatever it is.
That is the Senior Advisor Program.
And
The Road Rangers program now goes by the moniker of the Senior Advisor Program, and that is the group of retired managers that is, they associate with one another through the ICMA as a resource offered through FLC. So it's sort of a, you are right that FLC and the ICCMA are separate entities. They're sort of a, to use an analogy I've used in the past, a Venn diagram where they intersect. And that is a place where their resources are pooled for the benefit of smaller communities.
Okay, thanks for clearing up that ambiguity. Second of all, the normal process is that the vice mayor is elected amongst the council members after an election. And what I would like to do is submit an agenda item so that at the next council meeting, I would like to look for a replacement to take over the vice mayor duties.
We can do that.
You okay, Quinn, or everything okay?
So you're stepping down, is
vice mayor, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Yes, I believe all we have to do is add it as an agenda item and vote a new council member in as vice mayor. Is that correct, Randy?
That aligns with my understanding, and we'll look at your code if there's an issue between now and then.
Okay. Kyle, would you please add that to the agenda for the next meeting? Any other general business and comments, everyone, would you like to go? We need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right,
Second.
do I have a second? All right.
Four.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I got you, Vice Mayor.